Go ahead. I'll get to it.
Sir, in 2 minutes, dear participants, we are going to commence our conference sharp at 9:30 a.m. in association with our sponsor Panchami. It will begin with our esteemed keynote speaker following our first panel discussion. All of our tracks will run simultaneously starting at 12 p.m. Once paper presentations of all tracks wind up, we have our second keynote address to begin at 4:30 p.m. following our workshop on emerging trends to explore business frontiers in the new normal. Our final keynote address will commence at 7:30 p.m. tonight. Before we kick start our second panel discussion, requesting all participants to stay tuned throughout, as it's mandatory to fill feedback form for all sessions to receive certificate. We should set the phone here. Dear participants, we are going to commence our conference sharp at 9:30 a.m. in association with our sponsor Panchami. It will begin with our esteemed keynote speaker, following our first panel discussion. All of our tracks will run simultaneously starting at 12 p.m. Once paper presentations of all tracks wind up, we have our second keynote address to begin at 4:30 p.m., following our workshop on emerging trends to explore business frontiers in the new normal. A final keynote address will commence at 7:30 p.m. tonight before we kickstart a second panel discussion, requesting all participants to stay tuned throughout, as it's mandatory to fill feedback form for all sessions to receive certificate. Thank you. A very good morning, speakers, panelists, and participants. It's an absolute honor and privilege to welcome you all to our one-day international conference on sustainable business management practices and social innovation, organized by Vidyanidhi, Student Research and Development Cell of Center for Management Studies, Jain Deemed to be University. It's a moment of pride to announce that Jain Deemed to be University has secured an 85th rank by the NIRF ranking conferred by MHRD, Government of India, and ranked among the top universities in India, being considered the most desired destination for students across the globe. For its illustrious history of developing talent, it is a hub for learning in every sense of the word, known for its emphasis on education, entrepreneurship, research, and sports. Jain Deemed to be University has some of the best minds in the educational and research fields and focuses on the holistic development of their students and helps them in career visioning, planning, and manage life better. Center for Management Studies, an integral part of Jain Deemed to be University, is an institute that harnesses an international outlook with a commitment to create top business leaders and aspiring media professionals. Achieving an A grade by the National Assessment and Accreditation Council, NAAC, with a CGPA of 3.31, ranked 16 among the top 50 colleges in India, being highest in India for academic excellence with a score of 197.8 by India Today and rated A plus at a state level and A at national level by CRISIL in the year 2019. CMS is an ultimate destination for students where they can find new avenues to fulfill their dreams. Thank you once again to all our participants who have joined in. And before we begin this session with address from our Honorable Chancellor and Vice Chancellor, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce our dynamic administrator, a man with a vision who has left no stone unturned to inspire us in every possible way. His leadership is reflected in all developmental activities of our institution. Thank you so much for your presence over this event, sir. Now, without any further delay, I would like to welcome our esteemed director, Dr. Dinesh Neelkant, to deliver the welcome address. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So good morning, one and all, and my pranams to all of you. Respected Vice Chancellor, Dr. Raj Singh, the keynote speakers for today and the panelists, directors and deans of Jain Group of Institutions, participants from all over the countries, and faculty members. On behalf of Jain University, Center for Management Studies, Bangalore, I welcome you all for this international conference. First of all, let me appreciate the efforts of SRDC, Student Research Development Cell, Vidyanidhi, for putting such a wonderful show. I want to also appreciate the efforts of Dr. Sunita BK, Dr. Umakant, Dr. Varsha Agarwal, Dr. Shiva Chaudhary, Rohit Ramamurthy, and Baisakhi Devnath. All of you, and of course, there are many more who have helped for making this show wonderful. Now, coming back to the point is, let us look into the topic. The topic is sustainable business management practices and social innovation. Very well thought. Now, the first thing which comes to my mind when I look into sustainable business management practices is, first, let us look into it from the two levels. The first level is that our business should sustain. Because looking into the pandemic situation, just one second. I request the organizers to help Dr. Raj Singh to enter into the conference, please. He had got.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Coming back to the sustainable businesses, the first thing which comes to my mind is that the business should sustain. And the second thing is that if the business is sustaining, then what are the best management practices what we can bring in to see that this particular practices will help people, planet, and profit. So this is what is the key agenda for this. Now, when we are talking about business notions like cutthroat competition, cash is the king, make hay while the sun shines, seems more opportunistic rather than creating a sustainable business. How to align non-financial aspects with their commercial practices in a way so that they can derive a business benefit out of it is sustainable business. Sustainable goals are aligned with the business. It's not easy to do this because it's the major problem with sustainable business management practices are the implementation part of it. The implementation is not going to be easy. When we talk about our social responsibility, when we talk about our corporate social responsibility, when you look into the success rate is not that very high. And when we say that we want to make an impact on people, planet, and profit, the implementation part of it and the success percentage should go a little bit higher. Now, when we are talking about innovation, social innovation, see the topic is being very nicely weaved. So when I'm talking about innovation, it has become a critical factor in the process of differentiation. Today, if you want to beat a competition, you add value to any particular product, you don't have a competition at all. But when I'm adding a value to that competition, I have to understand that my point of differentiation was from social point of view. And that is going to lead to sustainable businesses. And that is the success of sustainable businesses. And today I am very sure that we are going to learn from so many experts, and I'm very happy that the SRDC cell has got into so many people, and it is going to be a pleasure listening to all these people, and definitely it is going to be helpful for all the academic community to deliver this to the students, because there is a need now that such things have to be delivered to the students, so that tomorrow when they are going to lead organizations, they will understand that what do you mean by sustainable business. It's not only a topic of seminars and conferences, it's a topic where now students should get into it. And therefore I thank the SRDC cell for bringing such a wonderful topic in SRDC, so that the students get involved in it. So I think I have spoken enough on this, and we have to learn so many things from today's international conference. And definitely it will be a bliss to learn from all of you. So thank you very much, and thanks for giving me an opportunity. Uh, Thank you very much. I hope now Dr. Raj Singh has joined uh, Shiva.
Yes,
Has
sir. We need to check it. Sir is in waiting room, and we are just trying to get him entered in the room.
Okay, okay. So
Yes, sir.
thank you very much for giving us an opportunity. God bless. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, to share your profound ideas with us. This address certainly benefited us with your breadth of knowledge and depth of expertise. Giving us your time really helps in making this conference fruitful to our participants. Thank you once again. And on this note, I would like to request all our participants to step back and wait for a minute for our VC sir to join. He is going to address us just in a couple of minutes. Thank you so much. I once again welcome you all to our international conference. And before we begin with the session, I would like to welcome conference convener, Professor Sunita BK, to deliver convener's conference note.
Thank you, Shiva ma'am. Respected Chancellor Sir, Dr. Chandraj Raichan, respected VC Sir, Dr. Raj Singh, our esteemed Director, Dr. Dinesh Neelkant, all the dignitaries present in this conference. I would like to start my speech with Albert Cisnet's wordings. Research is to see what everybody else has seen and think what everybody else has not thought. This is the concept what SRDCs always actually propagated in CMS. 3 years back, SRDC started in JUCMS. This was an initiative by our director, sir. We took baby steps in this process. We have come to this stage where we are hosting people from across the world. At the outset, I should thank our director, sir, for giving us this independence to organize such a magnum opus event and start this process and folding us every time and making us prosper throughout the process. It is very important for us to actually inculcate the culture of research in the students. SRDC has always been in forefront in Center for Management Studies in doing so. Sustainable development and social innovation as a concept of this conference is the need of the hour. Today, it is not about having sustainability as an option. Today, it is an inevitability. COVID-19 pandemic has shown to all of us that sustainability should be a strategic goal for all of us rather than just a mouth statement. And it is also very important for us to realize that sustainability is the need of the hour for every sphere of life. On this note, we again welcome all of you for this conference. We are extremely privileged that you are joining us in this conference. Thank you.
Some technical glitch, so just waiting for 2 minutes.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for conferring your valuable views with all of your strenuous efforts to promote a research-oriented environment in our institution and enlighten us with your ever-inspirational thoughts. It's been indeed a pleasure to listen to your valuable thoughts. Dear participants, we are here going to wait for a minute out of one technical glitch. We need to wait for a couple of minutes to stay back. We require your support at this moment. Thank you so much. On this note, I request our conference convener, Dr. Varsha Agarwal, to share the highlights of our conference. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Shiva. Colin Powell said, "A dream does not become reality through magic. It takes sweat, determination, and hard work. The day has come. after putting more than 5 months of time and 800 hours of hard work, 80 students, 15 faculty members, 30 session chairs, and so much more. Welcome to ISBMPSI 2021, organized by SRDC Vidyanidhi, Center for Management Studies, Jain deemed to be University, Bangalore, India. We have more than 80,000 participants from 60 countries across the globe, such as United States, UK, Iran, Nepal, Ethiopia, Sri Lanka, and many more. The conference offers 4 tracks: finance, marketing, general management, and human resource. We have received 458 total papers, out of which 344 papers have been accepted for presentation and publication from more than 14 countries. The conference holds 2 panel discussions, 4 keynote sessions, 1 workshop followed by 344 paper presentations, along with conferring prizes for best research papers in different categories. For motivational purpose, the best papers are going to be awarded with cash prizes and ISBN book publication. To add to our event, we have several sessions by eminent personalities of international repute from various industries, academia, politics, and diverse walks of life, being our esteemed speakers as professors from Harvard University, MIT, IIM, renowned industrialists, entrepreneurs, politicians, celebrities, and international figures, to mention a few. Once again, I would like to thank all our speakers and participants for their immense support and presence. Over to Dr. Shiva.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I once again welcome you all to our international conference. The world is full of diamonds and gems, and we are having some of them here today with us to build this event. And on this note, I would like to request Professor Rohit Ramurthy to introduce our first keynote speaker of the event. Over to Professor Rohit.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I am deeply honored to take this privilege in introducing our first keynote speaker for the day, a dynamic individual who's made praiseworthy contributions in the space of politics and economics at large. He wears multiple hats: a chartered accountant of repute, a corporate lead advisor standing, and a mentor to many people across the globe. He's a well-known advisor to corporates on law, finance, and on macroeconomic issues. Professional, he has mediated and solved some of the most complex court issues. Besides being a professional advisor, he's also been a keen academician. He's been the visiting professor of IIT on Indian models of economy, business, finance, and management. For the last 3 decades, he highly rated for his investigative writings. He has since then ceaselessly campaigned against at high paces. He has been a powerful opinion maker in India on issues of importance, particularly in the field of economics. Since 1990 until now, he has been consistently regarded as one of the most powerful persons in the country. The Business Baron magazine rated his knowledge of economics and finance and accounts as outstanding. He is the co-convener of Swadeshi Jagran Manch, which is currently spearheading the agitation against the evils of modern economic policies. He is also the editor of the famous and powerful socio-political weekly Tughlaq in Tamil. An icon, a legend, and a visionary beyond compare. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Shri Swaminathan Gurumurthy ji. Over to you, sir.
Namaskar. I am delighted to participate in this very profound event. Sustainable business management practices and social innovation, of course, a very complex and a very deep subject which cannot be fathomed in one event or in one speech. But in the context in which we are placed, the text of this event acquires a different meaning in my view. And whenever we approach a text like this, we have to take a helicopter view. We cannot look at things from the normal approach in the present and highly complex situation which has emerged in the post-COVID world. You know, there cannot be anything sustainable in practice unless there is a sustainable philosophy. Philosophy and practice are mutually dependent, mutually influential, and philosophy reduces itself into practice and practice becomes philosophy. And if you look at in this perspective how the world has gone in the last 200 odd years, I find that the shelf life of philosophies are crashing. Colonization lasted for 200 years. Everybody thought colonization will last forever, but it crashed in 200 years. Capitalism, in the sense in which it made its advent in the world, lasted for 100 years. Everybody thought it would last forever. It collapsed. Communism as a powerful counter to capitalism, everybody thought would be a very lasting philosophy in this, at least in respect of countries which are regarded as poor and third world. But it collapsed in 50 years. And globalization, which was thought as an eternal highway, has become questionable and is losing relevance. And according to the Economist magazine, it's over in 25 years. So when we are talking about sustainable practices, we have to look at what is the sustainable philosophy on which we are going to rest our practices. This is where I think a helicopter view is needed. It's not merely a bookish or a library view or a convocation, a view of an event. It's inadequate. We need a sustainable philosophy for resting our sustainable practices. And as I began, the context is important for the text. The text without context is utterly useless. So we have to rest this idea of sustainable business management practices and generally the idea of innovation in the context of the emerging post-COVID world. Because as a person who keenly observes both economics at a macro level and economics at business and management level, I find that what was regarded as sustainable 2 years back is no more sustainable. It's because both the context has changed as well as the very philosophy on which the world has been working from at least 1992, 93 onwards has become questionable. In fact, the world did not have such tall minds post-World War. It had brilliant minds, but it did not have tall minds to conceive of connecting a world with a diversity, with a sustainable approach. Because the makers of the world, the people who gave direction to the world, conceived of a homogeneous world. And the homogeneous world was to look at the West as the best for the rest to follow. This has been the most glaring failure of the West, because in 1951, the United Nations gave an advisory to the underdeveloped nations. If they have to develop, they have to discard their philosophies, their way of life, their relationship, the caste, creed, everything has to be given up. And that is the price you have to pay for development. This was not the advice of the current United Nations, which has lost all its relevance and meaning and has become weak. It was the advisory of then most powerful international forum, the United Nations, and it was very diligently followed by the rest of the world, and particularly India, which found that its past was meaningless to look at, and it has to look elsewhere for its developmental programs. And so a large country like India became a kind of an evangelized mind for this homogeneous approach. And a homogeneous India is inconceivable, and an India in a homogenized world is even more inconceivable. And that is what has caused enormous amount of setbacks to our entire approach to development, as well as how we should handle ourselves and also handle the world. And in this, a great confusion arose in post-independence India, about which I will say in some detail and then go into the micro idea of what should be the sustainable management practices, business management practices. The post-COVID world order will change forever. This is the statement made by Henry Kissinger, who conceived the pre-COVID world order. And that was the post-Cold War order. The pre-Cold War order was based on ideologies between capitalism and communism, between democracy and autocracy. But the post-Cold War world order rested only on balance of power. The might is right. All ideologies, all philosophies were discarded, and China and America came together to bring down the socialist world order. And with the result, all distinctions got erased except the idea of power. And with that, even the love for democracy, even the celebration of democracy, even the celebration of human rights got discounted. And what became important was power and economic development and development of markets. In this, the greatest gainer has been China, which brought about a cocktail of Marxian politics and market economics. These unmixable variables gave a head start to China. China, because of its Marxist polity, became non-transparent, impregnable. In fact, this has been the continuous work of the Western think tanks, particularly the American think tanks, that China is not transparent, but it is participating in the transparent world market as a country, not as a company, not as a business entity. With the result, it has been able to achieve results which no democracy based on rule of law and transparency could achieve. And this is what resulted in Trumpism in America. Trumpism was a protest to this kind of world order based on what is largely conceived as liberal democracy and market free market, which Francis Fukuyama conceived as the highway for the rest of the world to follow, the West, that had become highly questionable. And with the result, the development of the advent of Trump in America, which is now lasting beyond Trump. Joe Biden is also following the same model, because the post-Cold War order has been highly unsustainable. So the unsustainability of the post-Cold War order has resulted in a more unsustainable current world order, which has been made even more questionable as sustainable because of the COVID phenomenon. And you know, the dramatic change which has taken place in the last 3-4 years in geopolitics, with South China Sea and Taiwan, which was virtually given up by America, have becoming an important center of semiconductor technology source, and Hong Kong as a problem. Suddenly, the integrated world is becoming disintegrated, not only philosophically, but in practice, in relations. And if you look at how the world got integrated in the last 100 years, particularly post-World War, you will be amazed that the first passenger aircraft landed in 1919, and today we have almost 26,000 aircrafts flying all over the world, from every country to every country. And by 2028, we were planning to have something like 51,000 aircraft, which has now become questionable. All innovations are at risk. All investments are on hold. And if you look at what has been the transition of the world towards integration in the last 100 years, a population had grown from 1.6 billion to 7.8 billion. Trade has grown from 75, index 75 to 4,915. Migrant population has increased from 72 million to 248 million. Remittances from 126 billion to 689 billion. Cross-border investments from 6 trillion to 103 trillion. The world has got mixed up, integrated, interdependent. But suddenly all this has become questionable, whether it is sustainable or not. So globalization itself, which was driven by these integrating forces, has become questionable. And Economist magazine has gone as far as to say globalization is dead. So what is the sustainable model? Because India is one of the countries heavily influenced by the world. Without India being able to influence the world in any way, despite being 1/6 of humanity, India has been a great contributor to the world thoughts till the middle of the 19th century. But later, and particularly in the 20th century, India became a heavy importer and consumer of world ideas without being able to contribute its own. With the result, with our global dependent mindset, we became part of the globalization process and global supply chains, which were very important model for management, business and management principles as well as philosophy. The global supply chains became a very, very important factor. And this was what was being talked about in the last 2 decades. And that has become very heavily questioned today, whether it is sustainable, whether we can go ahead with this. And there is reversal of globalization with the advent of Trump, who declared America first is the American policy and not the world and America as equal, because America has many advantages and also disadvantages, which has really made it difficult for America to captain the world as it has been doing since the World War. And with China gaining not only technical superiority, but also financial superiority, and in a sense, a seemingly political superiority with an autocratic state with the largest army under one leader, which is unthinkable in democracy. And they have what is known as a sustainable politics. The sustainable politics in China, though it may not be sustainable in the long run, how long China will be able to sustain as an autocracy is a highly questionable affair. But the fact remains that it has been so sustainable, so consistent, that the world went to invest in China because of the very autocracy which the world was hating. So we have now raised a Frankenstein, and the world is now getting divided between autocracy and democracy. This is the most important aspect of the post-COVID world, where democracy is becoming a threatened issue. In fact, in 2019, Foreign Policy Magazine of America came out with, well before the pandemic, came out with a very, very critical study that the liberal democracies are failing. And in fact, in the Eastern and Central Europe, in the next decade or so, there may not be democracy at all. Even the liberal democracies today, as they are, constitutes only 14% of world's population. India added, it becomes close to 31, 32. If you look at the entire world of democracy, in whichever way you look at it, is 44%. 56% of the world is under autocracy. So now it is becoming a question of survival of democracy, for which the Foreign Policy magazine said India is the only silver lining or golden lining of democracy, and without democracy, the world of democracy may not survive. So, sustainability of the world, for the sustainable philosophy of the world, how important is democracy, and for that, how important is India, is not among the subjects discussed in India first. So, it's a very, very sad situation that we have got to understand the subject of what is sustainable and what is not sustainable first from the Indian perspective within, and also what India can do outside, and how India can work with the world. A free India, an open India, an India which sees no differences between gods and religions, between people and people, between color and color, between race and race. It has such a huge contribution to the world, made to the world, but the Indian mind doesn't have the confidence to think that it has the philosophy, it has the practice, it has the lifestyle to do it. I'll just give you one example. Professor Ramal of Hawaii University did a 30-year study on the violence in different parts of the world for the last 2,500 years, and he came to the conclusion that some 680 million people died at the minimum, or 1.2 billion people at the maximum in human action on humans. The only country where there has been no killing, mass killing till the 13th century, except Ashoka's Kalinga War, was India. So there is something which has made this country, which is the largest populated country, to have a sustainable philosophy to avoid conflicts. So this is not how we perceive India, and COVID-19 is not only forcing India, it has already forced America to think for itself, and COVID-19 is forcing India to think for itself. And this is going to have a multi-dimensional impact on not only India, but also over the world. As I said, US response has been long before the COVID world, America first. This completely changes the principles and philosophies on which the world was seemingly going on a sustainable model. And the Indian response to the post-COVID situation is self-reliance, Atmanirbhar. This is not a slogan. This has always been a brooding consciousness in India, and it has now become manifest as a philosophy for future, because this is how the world has been moving and India has not been conscious of it. I will tell you how the world has been moving in the last 50, 60 years. As I said, in 1951, the United Nations said that there has to be a homogenized world, and all ideas, philosophies, practices, social models other than the Western model has to be given up if a country has to progress. This was the drive of the homogenization of the world towards the Western models. In 1990, this got institutionalized because of globalization. But in 2005, a very big U-turn took place, which was not noticed in India. It has not been noticed even today. The G20 nations made a declaration that there cannot be a one-size-fits-all model for the world. This is what the United Nations said in 1951. There has to be a one-size-fits-all model if a country has to develop. It has to conform to the one-size global model. This was institutionalized through various world bodies through globalization in 1990s. But in 2005, after seeing the kind of stress the world economy has been undergoing, and also because of the political turmoil resulting from 9/11 attack, the world came to the conclusion that there cannot be a one-size-fits-all model as a sustainable model for the entire world. And so they said each country will have to develop and work out its own models, though there can be shared common experiences. This was repeated by the World Bank in 2008. And the World Bank said it is very painful for us who have always worked on a one-size-fits-all model to say that there cannot be a one-size-fits-all model, one-size-fits-all philosophy for all parts of the world, and every country will have to work out its own. And in 2010 to 2013, in different discussions, the United Nations finally came out in the Millennial Declaration that one-size-fits-all model, they said so, is impossible as a practice or as a principle. So there has been a U-turn, but none of this was echoed in the Indian discourse. Only in 2019, when the new government came, they put as the mandate for the Niti Aayog that there cannot be a one-size-fits-all model for the world, that no model from the rest of the world can be transplanted into India as a sustainable model. What we need is just what will work in and for India. So this appeared to be some kind of an autarkic and an inward-looking proposition at the time. But this has been rendered completely valid by the post-COVID development, where every country is seeking an umbrella of itself, as the global umbrella has become weakening and leaking. So we have to look at what is a sustainable business practice. This may look at something very, very abstract, something very, very distant, but I will bring you to a nearest example. Take, for instance, the corporate governance model. All of you are aware that corporate governance is an issue throughout the world, and in India also it is a very, very important issue. But corporate governance also, the USAID funded study, we studied the Anglo-Saxon model, German model, Japanese model as three distinct corporate governance models, came out to the declaration that there cannot be a one-size-fits-all corporate governance model. That is not sustainable. There cannot be a sustainable corporate governance model for the entire world. And so the Anglo-Saxon model is market-centric. The Japanese model is bank-centric. The German model is bank and labor-centric, because that is the character of those countries. Anglo-Saxon model will not fit into Japan. The bank model will not fit into the Anglo-Saxon societies. The German model integrates the labor into management. It's a very different philosophy. But what is absent is an Indian model, because Indians have not thought about it. Indians never felt that they needed a corporate governance model, and India desperately needs a corporate governance model. The CIIs, ASSOCHAMs, and FICCIs are only institutions which apply to the government. They do not think how important it is to have an Indian corporate governance model. I will tell you in just 2 minutes how we need a different philosophy and different practice for a sustainable corporate governance model, taking it as the example for your convention that there has to be sustainable business management practices. You know, the entire idea of corporate governance was the development of the post-Asian crisis. Till then, nobody even thought of corporate governance model. When this happened, the Western financial institutions and Wall Street said Asians are crony capitalists, and that is why this, and we need corporate governance model for them. But within 3 years, the same thing happened in their place with Enron and WorldCom collapsing. They said they need corporate governance model. But the corporate governance has changed in the last 15, 20 years so much. There is complete lack of shareholder oversight in the entire American economy, because the funds have intervened between the corporate and the shareholders. 70% of the shareholding in US corporates is held by funds and not by shareholders directly. So there is what is called as agency capitalism. The shareholders are represented by agents. And on the corporate side, there is no promoter. And American corporates are promoter-less corporates. And Indian corporates are promoter-led corporates. And if you want to have a proper corporate governance model, you have to control, regulate, discipline, and oversee the promoters. But in India, the corporate governance model has, on the one hand, in company law, puts lot of control restrictions on the promoters. On the other hand, it relies on the independent directors, and the independent directors are easily defined in India as people who are not related to the promoters. In America, even though there is no definition of an independent director because there is no promoter. In India, it is the promoters who manage the company, and it is the shareholders who oversee it. The participation of funds, even in listed companies in India, has not brought about the levels of agency capitalism which is witnessed in Anglo-Saxon societies. And that is why the mutual agency capitalism of a company being managed by an agent, shareholder being represented by an agent, this requires a very different corporate governance model in Anglo-Saxon societies, which is not the case in Japan, which is not the case in Germany, but it is being adopted in India. I think it is a very unsustainable model. Today we have some 30-40 page regulation for independent directors, which is completely irrelevant in India. You have to control the promoter. You have to discipline the promoter. Much of the shareholding in India is directly held. Very little shareholding in India is held through funds. But we imagine and transplant the Anglo-Saxon model into India, and that is why it is not sustainable, because there is no independent thinking in India as to what is an Indian development model. Another most important challenge, because this is why I cited this as an example, this you can extend to many other areas of corporate business model. For example, take even the NPA rules. I am the director of the RBI, and the views I express are my own. I think the RBI rules of NPA are completely wrong for India, because India is not an equity-led economy. It is a bank-led economy. If banks are to deny credit to the borrowers based on the principles which are applicable largely or only to equity-led economies, you are actually destroying Indian businesses. This is what has happened, because the axiomatic principle is that if somebody doesn't pay the bank within 90 days, his creditworthiness is questionable, and if the bank has that debt, its liquidity is questionable, and not only its liquidity, its solvency is questionable, and because the entire bank shares are held by the stock market, and the stock market value of the shares may go down, with the result the bank may get into difficulties. This is the base of the principles of NPA adopted in market-led economies. But in India, it's very different. I'm not talking about private sector. Banks take the public sector. Banks, the entire very large part of the shareholding, almost over 60%, is held by the government. And there is no question of the banks collapsing through market action. It is a liquidity problem, and it is not a solvency problem. We have transformed what is a liquidity and solvency problem in the West, and which is only a liquidity problem in India, into a solvency problem, because we blindly adopted the Western principles. And that will not work for credit management in India. And that is why nearly, in my assessment, 60 to 70% of the borrowers have been disqualified, and the banks of fund, they are not able to lend because no borrower, large part of the borrowers in India are disqualified from borrowing. This is not a sustainable business management practice for either the banks or the credit market, or for the RBI, or for the government, or for businesses. So when we talk about sustainable business practices, it has to be focused on conditions relevant to India, peculiar to India. And that is how even management development models are there, as I said, in Japan and Germany. They have not borrowed the Anglo-Saxon models blindly because it will not apply. Your Niti Aayog says, which is Niti Aayog, direction to Niti Aayog by the government of India, cabinet resolution says that you must adopt only what works in and for India. That is the direction for the entire economy. But that is now not how we look at our business practices or credit practices. I will complete with 3 important points. The most important challenge before the world, which needs collective action, is environment. Environment is, I am not going into global warming and all that. The naked things that are happening in the last 100 years, 150 years, we have lost something like 30% of the forest, rainforest in the world. And this forest destruction is naked. It doesn't need any study. The rivers are drying up. And we are having a particular approach to life, which particularly take economics. It says urbanization means development, which means if you are in rural area, you cannot develop. You cannot not only develop, you are bad, you are backward, you are illiterate. You are not fit for the contemporary world. You are a Neanderthal man. This is how we are distinguishing between urban and rural areas. But this is something ridiculous. After the electronic highway has occupied the entire country, the need for national highway itself is less. Except for transporting goods, there need not be accumulation of human beings. The way we are accumulating human beings in urban areas is the greatest threat to environment. And we need to develop environmental consciousness and not environmental regulations only. Environmental consciousness are a product of environmental philosophy. The environmental philosophy is that we regard nature as sacred. Nature is regarded as secular in modern economics. This is the continuation of the Abrahamic thinking. The world was created for the enjoyment of man. The world is not created for the enjoyment of man. The world is created for man to live with nature, and it cannot be an anthropocentric world. It has to be a human participant world. And that is why, we have a series of environmental consciousness promoting rituals, samskaras. We worship the trees, we worship the rivers, we worship the mountains. And in our, to cite my own example, we had a small piece of land on which we had to build a house for a large joint family in Chennai. There was a tree almost in the center of the house. We ensured that we did not cut the tree. We devised a plan to keep the tree almost inside the house. This is our duty to nature. This is what your education system, your public discourse, your government policies, your secular approach to the entire life has made it impossible for human beings to recognize how important it is to integrate nature with yourself. And so, environmental consciousness is important. I'll give you just one example as to how Ghana dealt with this issue. In Ghana, malshegu groves are very important and considered sacred by the population. But these traders and market economists, they went and said, what is sacred? Why are you worshipping this nonsense? And they began evangelizing those people into believing the trees and the groves with which they live, the animals with which they live, they know which animal to kill at which point, which tree to cut at which point. They made them give up all that and they began hunting and cutting the trees. The Ghana government had to stop all this and declare the Malshegu Grove as sacred to protect them. See, there is nothing like human consciousness. And we have that in abundance in our philosophy, in our practices. But that is not put into modern education. With the result, there is a huge environmental challenge, and I see a need for change in education from schooling to MBA to create this towering consciousness to save. Then sustainable lifestyle is important for sustainable consumption. Sustainable consumption means sustainable growth. Sustainable growth will lead to sustainable business, and sustainable business will lead to sustainable business practices. Just as an unsustainable model of the global supply chain has disturbed the entire world, the world doesn't know how to move. Biggest question before European Union is whether to ally with China or to move away from China. Because 15 years, the West has been like a honeybee that has fallen into a honey pot, which cannot come out because it enjoys the honey. If it does not come out, you know what will happen to the honeybee. So this is how unsustainable practices land human beings, nations, world into trouble. That is why I see a need for a helicopter view. What is sustainable is not to be decided by the context in which you live, but the context in which your grandson will live, in which the 5 generations from you will live. That is our forefathers, our rishis, our great thinkers, our intellectuals, right down to Mahatma Gandhi. Great people thought like that. It is only politicians who think of the next election or next by-election who tweak sustainability to suit what will suit them as that which will suit for India. This is a big danger, and I don't think academic institutions and research institutions should fall a prey to it. We must develop an independent mind. We should never have government dependent or leader dependent or political party dependent or media dependent or public movement dependent. Even the public movements have become focused on the context today. Mahatma Gandhi started independence movement for his sons to get freedom. And we are today having movements for us to get something, and for me to get something, for me reservation, for me this, for me that. What happens to my grandson is irrelevant. You know, this is not a sustainable model. So we need to have a huge introspection, and the consumption-led growth, which of course all of you are familiar with Walter Rostow, who said modernity ultimately means shopping. And this was very seriously taught for 30 years, and it became a macroeconomic model as well as micro business model for most of the consumer goods producing companies. So this has disturbed the world. An unsustainable model, an unsustainable philosophy, an unsustainable practice disturbs the future, certainly, and it is disturbing us in the present also. So my simple model for us to think is, what is sustainable business management is related to the philosophy which we adopt for our practice. It is equally true of innovation. For example, if India had not thought of, India did not develop the confidence to think of a COVID vaccine, we would not have produced a Covaxin. You know, Covaxin is now considered to be so superior to most of the medicines in the world, and it has the least or perhaps no side effect at all. And the Bharat Biotech, I am told, is thinking of not even an invasive vaccine. They are thinking of a nasal drop. You know, this confidence that we can do it is something which is lacking in this country, primarily because of the English education system, which makes us easily to look to the West because of the materials that are trotted out in millions of pages. And I think we have to move away from the compelling situation, contextual situation, and think for ourselves, both philosophically and in terms of practice, as to what is sustainable. And I hope that this conference gives this kind of lead to people, hundreds of people who have assembled. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Words fail me at this point in time. Such an elaborate explanation in 40 minutes. You put everything in a nutshell, and you have rightly defined the helicopter view in your own words. Thank you so much for your valuable time, sir. We are highly indebted to you. Thank you so much for your presence. It really means a lot, and I'm sure all our participants today will take home a lot of learning from your session. So, once again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for your time. And I would rather call it a devotion to all of us. So, thank you so much for being here. It certainly means a lot. Now, I hand it over.
I take leave of all of you. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Please. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Professor Rohit. Now, on this note, I would like to extend a warm welcome to our esteemed Vice Chancellor, Dr. Raj Singh, who is always there to impart his overwhelming support, paving a strong and clear pathway to follow. And I feel honored to take this privilege to welcome you, sir, for inspiring us with your mentorship and guidance by delivering your golden words of advices for today's event. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. Mr. Gurumurthy has left, but whatever he said, I listened to him thoroughly, has really set the context not only for today's conference, but I think for the entire education sector and the industrial world. And the way he talked about context is really, really fascinating. And he said at the end that the sustainability approach which a business follows is related to the philosophy one follows, the philosophy one believes in. And if you look at next few years, while the post-Cold War era, which he mentioned elaborately, has changed the context what existed before that, 1992, and it's almost the same time we opened up as a country and we reformed, we connected to the rest of the world, which had somewhat failed. And the second factor, of course, has been, or which is, I think, almost concurrent with the post-Cold War era, is the advent of technology and the industrial revolutions. As if these two were not enough for us to redefine our business context, the COVID-19 stuck, and COVID magnified, expedited, and intensified our thought process. And what were the glaring gaps in our business practices? And therefore, today, we feel there's a sense of urgency. And in this context, I think holding of this conference is very, very contemporary, very contemporary. The governance, which I mentioned in the conference of our School of Commerce only yesterday, is not only following the law, not only being compliant, but I think also evolving certain voluntary practices. What Mr. Gurumurthy talked about as consciousness. I think that is more important than the regulatory environment. And in this context, let me come down to now the ground level from the helicopter view, which I said the context, and I think I'll be able to make more sense having had this helicopter view given by him. The biggest question when we talk about the businesses today is, who are we working for? Are you working for only the shareholders or the investors, the configuration of which has significantly changed? Or we're looking at all the stakeholders. And with this view, which takes us to the topic of today's conference. One of the recent views has been, which shapes again the environmental, society, and governance issues, which is very pertinent to today's conference, is the market sophistication, which is increasing every passing day, and the workforce skills, managerial skills, which are improving, particularly in recent past, thanks to a lot of initiatives at the global level and national level. And this demands a focused and institutionalized research in the area of environmental concerns. If you look at one of the recent studies by Jayant Verma and other colleagues or the researchers, it says that as these two things increase, that is workforce skills as well as market sophistication, the green frontier production will be expanding as compared to farm and factory kind of production. And that is one area which is defining the business strategies of today. The second factor which has happened in terms of conceptual sophistication, which is direct bearing on what kind of model of business we should be adopting, what kind of philosophy we should be adopting, is the integration of three profound thoughts which directly connect us to the society and the social innovation. I did mention again yesterday that it was C.K. Prahlad's concept of bottom of the pyramid, the fortune at the bottom of the pyramid, the microfinancing of Muhammad Yunus, and the capability approach of Amartya Sen. If you link at these three profound concepts, it can define a strategic model not only for businesses, and many businesses have adopted this in the last 15 years, but also for academic institutions like us. That what is that approach we should be taking when we impart education, and overcome some of the greatest weaknesses of our education system has suffered, for which we have been blamed and blamed squarely. And I think there's a sense of urgency for us also to refine, to redirect, to refocus on what kind of education we impart. Now, today's topic basically looks at two things. One is the business and operational strategy, and the second is the sustainability considerations. How a marriage between the two takes place, because traditionally they have been thought about separately. And in most cases, it is just a compliance issue. It has not become part of our business and operational strategies. And I think that's the gap which we need to look at as we move forward. And that comes not from the law or the regulatory environment, it comes from what we think as our values of the business we live for, the philosophy we follow, and the consciousness as individuals, as owners, as shareholders, as investors, all taken together. If you look at the Boston Consulting Group analysis of the situation of business in the view of sustainability, they have talked about 4 different stages as our businesses operate. And the most basic level, and this was interestingly almost when the COVID stuck, this analysis was published. The first one is the corporate social responsibility we've been talking about for almost 2.5 decades, starting from 1990s, more particularly. It suggests only minor changes in the value drivers of a business, very, very minor, cosmetic changes. It's a word which feels nice, but doesn't have much of business value. The second level is basically compliance driven. The laws have come, you have to spend so much on CSR, you have to undertake social activities. And this led to some process improvement so that we comply automatically. Otherwise, separate efforts have to be put in. If you look at the further expansion of this view and integrate with the business philosophy or operational strategies of yours, it leads to reactive changes for sustainability. Because there's a pressure from the environment, there's a pressure from the investors, there's a pressure from society and community at large. And this leads to stepwise business model changes for us. And in doing so, we start looking at every individual business or subunits of the business and see how they become more efficient, and then integrate them among themselves, and then further integrate with the community and society we serve or we operate in, we immediately affect. And this leads to the last stage, which I think should be the topic of discussion today. And I'm sure many, many ideas will come through all researchers and presenters of papers today in this conference, that leads to innovation of business models and leads to creation of an ecosystem which leads to co-optimization of business and social benefits. Traditionally, as I said, we have been looking at only the business or the financial benefits and not so much at social benefits. I'm reminded of one interaction with Mr. J.J. Irani, who was with Tata, at that time used to be called as Tisco. And somebody asked him, what was it that made Tisco as the least cost steel producer in the world? And I was stunned what he said. And this I'm talking to you about 2008-9, I heard him and we had this discussion. And he said, because of the Naxalite problems in Jharia mines, they are in the erstwhile Bihar, now some parts have gone to Jharkhand and other areas. And this was talking about 1950s. He said most of the steel producers left that area because they were feeling threatened by the Naxalite movement. It was only Tatas who stayed back because they were not harmed by Naxalites, which is, they did so much of social service. They opened schools, they built roads, they had water facilities. And the children of these people or the family members of these people who involved in Naxalism hugely benefited. And that's why they were not harming Tatas while they were there in these Jharia mines. And he said the single most important predominance in having these mines, ownership of these mines, led to the iron ore at almost a negligible price or negligible cost, which made Tata Steel or the Tisco as the least cost producer of steel in the world. Now, these are some of the indications from these cases that how integrating into our business strategy the social and community issues can make us more sustainable. How the concern for environment can make us more sustainable. I think these are the issues which I'll request each one of you to focus at as you deliberate, as you discuss throughout the day. And we are eagerly looking forward to listen to some of the eminent speakers who are lined up. Thank you so much for having me, even though you have to change some schedule because of some technical issues. I'm thankful to all the organizers. I congratulate Dr. Dinesh and the entire team for putting together this conference. And I know very well what it takes to put together a conference of this magnitude. And the lineup of speakers is absolutely amazing, absolutely amazing. I think I once again thank all of those speakers who have agreed to our request to be with us today, and particularly Mr. Guru Murthy, whose presence attached a greater authenticity to our efforts, to the efforts of our students and faculty members. Thank you so much and wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for conferring your valuable views on sustainability, along with all of your strenuous efforts to promote a research-oriented environment in our institution and enlighten us with your ever-inspirational thoughts. It's been indeed a pleasure to listen to your valuable thoughts. I once again welcome you all to our international conference. And before we begin with the session, I would like to request Professor Baishakhi Devnath to introduce and welcome our next speaker. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Shiva. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, respected Vice Chancellor, sir, Dinesh, sir, Chainraj, sir, all the esteemed panelists and my dear participants. It gives me an immense pride and pleasure to welcome today one of the most iconic politicians and entrepreneurs the country has ever seen. I heartily welcome you, Rajiv Chandrasekhar, sir. Mr. Rajiv Chandrasekhar is a third-term member of parliament, presently representing the state of Karnataka in the Rajya Sabha from the BJP. He has a master's in computer science and holds an honorary doctorate of science. As a computer scientist, he has started his career in Intel, Silicon Valley, USA. He was the part of the design team that has designed the Intel 486 and Pentium microprocessor. On returning to India, he became a tech entrepreneur and had set up India's first and largest greenfield cellular telephony network, post which he has invested, backed, and mentored various startups and built brands. Presently, he is the national spokesperson of BJP and the vice chairman of PIF Center for Economic Studies. He is also member of Parliamentary Committee on Finance, Public Accounts Committee, and is also an active member of the Joint Select Committee on Data Protection Bill 2019. In Parliament, he possesses a concrete record of activism and advocacy, ranging from raising 2G scam, NPS to issues for veterans and armed forces like OROP, National War Memorial to technology governance issues like net neutrality, privacy, freedom of speech, etc. He emphasizes on the matters of governance and reforms, technology, national security, and issues concerning the state of Karnataka and Bangalore. A son of Air Force veteran who has spent his childhood around far-flung Air Force stations, living amongst men and families who have influenced significantly in shaping his life's mission. It is indeed a moment of immense pride to welcome you, sir. Thank you very much for your valuable presence. Over to you, Rajiv, sir. Sir, you're not audible, sir. You're muted.
Yeah. Good morning, and thank you for that warm introduction. And thank you for having me here this morning for this important conference. I happened to hear my friend and mentor Gurumurthy ji speak, and there are many things about what he says and what he has said that I completely agree with. And in a sense, I will take off from where he left off. You know, as somebody who has been an entrepreneur and is now looking at the economy and business from the other side, if you want to call it that, which is the side of public policy making and public service, I will give you a slightly different perspective. My perspective is less philosophical, less ideological, and more to do with my experiences as an entrepreneur. Gurumurthy ji said, you know, three very important things. He said, for example, the first very important point that I think all of you in this conference should embed as a starting point to any conversation about the future and future sustainable businesses is that for the best part of the last 3 decades, the world has been caught up in a race for economic growth. And it has been a race that has been bereft of the value and foundational principles of any kind, because for the last 30 years, trade and economy has significantly migrated from democracies and open societies and free markets to China. And while you may think that this is about China bashing, this is not about China bashing. It is effectively stating a fact that over the last 3 decades, the center of gravity of the global economy and global trade has moved from democracies and free markets where there were some foundational principles to a country which is now dominating and to a large part dominating trade and economy, where the foundational principles that should be so important to the planet and to all of us are either very hazy or absent. So that is one point. The second point that Gurumurthy ji said, and I think this is again an important thing to just to remind all of us, is that sustainability, the word sustainability, the phrase sustainability, the ideology of sustainability has to be defined very much with the weightage to the future generations. There is a tendency for people to sit in these ivory towers and come up with these definitions of sustainability that are very near term. They are defined by today and yesterday rather than tomorrow and day after tomorrow. And I think he made that point that sustainability has to be defined by the public interest of future generations. That is, in my opinion, a mental formulaic transformation that we need to understand. And the third thing is that policy making about the economy and indeed sustainable economies has to be less and less. There's a corollary of the second point, which is that it has to be less and less done by people who have an extraordinary amount of stake in the short term and not as much of a stake in the long term, which is typically politicians and bureaucrats who are thinking of, or even entrepreneurs and investors who think of 1 quarter, 2 quarters, and have absolutely no incentive to think 5 years down the road or a generation down the road. So I'll leave these 3 background points as reminders and points that I've taken from Gurumurthy ji before I launch into my point. my points. Look, I think it is a no-brainer, and anybody who does not accept this fact that I'm going to lay out is either not plugged into the reality, or his or her brain has stopped functioning. And this is the point I'm going to make, which is that post-COVID world is going to be a very different world. It is not going to be business as usual, not for public policymakers, not for educationists, not for students, and definitely not for business and government. The post-COVID world is a world where people have got an extraordinary, in almost a step function manner, an extraordinarily higher degree of awareness of the concept of sustainability and all of the aspects that go into sustainability, including personal wellness. The sustainability was almost seen before COVID as a topic that was captured by or hijacked by a group of intellectuals in the context of some treaty, Paris Accord, all of that, and green activists, and the whole discussion was centered around almost like an intellectual conversation that did not apply to the mainstream citizen. And I think post-COVID, you will find that the general awareness and the general need amongst a large mass of people to have a say in the way the future development and future growth of the planet and future growth of the community, future growth of the cities, country, whatever happens, is going to be far higher than before. So I leave that one point with you. The second point that is arising out of COVID is the fact that there is going to be a tectonic change. And I think Guru Murthy ji alluded to this in the way the global economy is stacked up. Currently, the center of gravity of the global economy and indeed global trade is one country to the north of us, which is one of the biggest ironies in the world, because a country that has a hazy political system, authoritarian political system, claims to have free markets, is now the supply chain master for the democracies of the world. I mean, there is an inherent contradiction there, which the COVID, post-COVID, and the COVID crisis has brought the focus on. And the third point, post-COVID, is that the power of the internet and the power of technology, the Internet 2.0, Industry 4.0, the disruptive power of that is already evident. Because if you look at the GDPs of countries today, you look at India's GDP, you look at the US GDP, you look at any other country, the GDP stack up post-COVID is going to be materially altered, redesigned, re-architected from the GDP stack up pre-COVID. So there's disruptive power, there is citizen awareness on the increase, and there is tectonic geopolitical changes around the world. These are three realities that should guide our thinking as we lay out a roadmap for sustainable businesses, a sustainable world, etc. Now, I will just make this point that I've been an entrepreneur, and I've been an entrepreneur in India, which is, in my opinion, more difficult than just being an entrepreneur. Being an entrepreneur in India requires you to have a different type of mental makeup and physical makeup than entrepreneurship in the US or anywhere else. Anyway, be that as it may, one of the clear things about the world pre-COVID was that business was seen as a binary. Economic growth was seen as a binary. It is either economic growth or sustainability. It is either economic growth or values. It is either economic growth and expansion or caring for the community and stakeholders. It was almost always presented for decades that economic growth is necessary for the prosperity of a nation. Economic growth and prosperity of a nation therefore depends on the economic success of its businesses and entrepreneurs. And if you want economic success in a business, you have to be prepared, almost like a binary, to sacrifice and not have a conversation about sustainability, ethics and values, people, and communities. So this is the almost a conventional wisdom that was drilled into people's mind, that You have to be successful as a business for a country to be successful and its economy to grow. And a country has to grow its economy because the government's fiscal needs to provide for poverty and all of those requirements required these businesses to grow. And the businesses couldn't grow unless you are prepared to sacrifice something. And the something was people, environment, ethics, values, all of them or some of them. Now, this is the backdrop that we have experienced for decades, and this is not unique to India. This is not unique to India. This is pretty much all over the world in different weightages and different forms and sizes and shapes. I will lay out that I will postulate that, and as the Vice Chancellor said, that there is a clear move, there is a momentum that I alluded to, which is also linked to the post-COVID consciousness amongst people, that we need a certain type of economic progress. It is not an all or nothing economic progress. There is a conversation and a narrative and a discourse building around what is the nature of the economic growth that we want. When you talk about economic growth and the nature of economic growth, the conversation for a long time has been about equitable. So then it becomes about socialism versus capitalism, communism versus free markets, all of that. Equity is not ideology, but it unfortunately has been made that way for many, many years and decades. But leaving equity to the side for a minute, if we all agree as Indians that we want economic progress and we want economic growth, the conversation today is about what is the nature of that economic growth. What are the various parameters? What are the various variables in the equation for economic growth? Is it a single variable equation or are there multiple variables at play? Is this an equation that needs to balance those multiple variables and then deliver on economic growth? Or should we go back to the world where it was a binary, where it was economic growth or nothing? So I think I'll lay out quickly, and I don't want to take too much of your time. I think you have many more, many youngsters who want to talk about this, but I just want to lay 3 or 4 points for you to think about. I believe strongly that the future, this Atmanirbhar Bharat concept that the Prime Minister of India has laid out, this vision for a new India, is about defining a new kind of economic growth, which has, of course, equity in it. But it also has the variables that we need to think of, which will define sustainability and sustainable growth. And I will lay 3 points there again for you to think about, which I believe are required for this kind of sustainable businesses and sustainable growth. First of all, businesses have to be about the communities they serve. Businesses have to be about the people involved in the business. This is almost becoming a non-negotiable instrument. Now I'll explain to you, give you some backdrop. We have seen over the last decade the growth of entities in big tech like Facebook, Twitter, social media, Google, all of them. And the business model of all these companies, and some of them are many of them are in India as well, almost completely depends on exploiting the consumers that use those platforms. They either use their data, they use their privacy, they breach, they use algorithms to model their behavior and conduct. And this has been a model that has never been held to account, never has been scrutinized. Now there is, if you can see, there is a pushback. People are now beginning to say, these big tech companies, whether you are Amazon or whether you are Jio or whether you are X or you are Y, they cannot be business models that are all very successful, very technologically innovative, but at the end of the day, they give a damn about the people that they are supposed to be, who are supposed to be their stakeholders. So that is one example that I'm telling you about how sustainability has to be about businesses working carefully, businesses respecting the people who are their stakeholders. And I won't take too much time on that, but I think this is a concept that you can develop. The second is businesses and governments. And I use the word businesses and governments fungibly because for me, these are the two entities that, that will drive this whole idea of sustainability on behalf of the people that they serve. The second issue is about environment. And Gurumurthy ji talked about the de-greening of the world. If those of you are in Bangalore, you know these arguments and some fights that I've had with governments of the day about building bridges and building flyovers that remove thousands of trees, and then there'll be a bland statement saying that, do you want a road or do you want trees? Now it is no longer a binary like that. We want the road and we want the tree. So that is the narrative that people are now beginning to say. We want our green space, we want our wellness, we want to be healthy, we want to live well, and we want to commute. So the conversation will go to the second point. The second aspect of sustainability is increasing awareness amongst governments and businesses that the care for the environment has to be factored into their business plans and models, or their development plans and models. The second. And the third is, and this maybe people don't connect it to sustainability, but I do, which is the moral, ethical underpinning of businesses. And I say this because almost for many, many decades, India and abroad, there is almost a subconscious confirmation bias that says, no, it's okay to break rules, it's okay to break laws, because you can't do well in business if you don't do that. There is now a clear movement for the stakeholders, the people, the communities that these businesses serve, say, look, no, we don't just want you to give it to us cheap. We want you to also confirm to us that you are not breaking any laws while doing it. So the ethical, moral underpinning of businesses, which has a direct correlation, and you're all students of management, to the issue of opportunity for entrepreneurship. And I'll give you a simple example as from my own experience. Many years ago, and I will not use names, of course, when I had finished my stint in telecom and I was exiting telecom, one of the fellow entrepreneurs walked up to me and said, hey, Rajiv, you're being foolish. You're selling your business for $1 billion. If you wait 6 more months, 6 more years, it'll be worth X billion dollars, blah, 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 blah. And there is this minister coming in, that minister coming in, that minister can be gamed, we can get this policy done, etc. And I remember telling him, and I'm not here trying to position myself in any way, but I remember telling him one thing, that in business, if your business model is built around gaming the system, remember that business model of gaming the system, there will always be somebody who comes across once in a generation, once in 5 years, who's better at gaming the system than you. Gaming the system, political capture cannot be a competitive advantage for businesses that are sustainable, because they will collapse. They will collapse in front of you. We have seen the Kingfisher example. We've seen the Jet Airways example. We've seen many, many examples in this country. Ethical, moral underpinnings in businesses determine their sustainability. And the environment aspect, the commitment to people aspect, expand the sustainability of the business vis-a-vis the broader theme of sustainability. So I won't take more time on this with you, but I'll leave these ideas for you. I think being a student in today's age, being in the generation of being a student at this time in the world's development roadmap is a great thing, because you are at the cusp of tremendous change. It is if I could exchange my position today, I would love to go back to being a student and studying and making a contribution to what is definitely going to be an absolutely brilliant new world, changed new world going forward. Now, whether it will take 10 years or 20 years, but I am absolutely clear that the momentum of the world is to create changes. The momentum of these technologies that we have today, the internet, Industry 4.0, Internet 2.0, is all going to disrupt every model that we have. And the increased transparency and the increased participation that is being allowed for citizens all around the world in determining the future, participating in the future of their communities and their countries and their worlds, are also pushing all of us in the direction of a much more sustainable economic model, sustainable development model, which will end up, in my opinion, in a sustainable world. And I'll leave it at that. I wish all of you, happy discussions and a great discourse on this great topic, and wish you success. Thank you. Jai Hind, Jai Karnataka.
Thank you so much, sir, for that enthralling speech from where Gurumurthy sir has left with a model. You have given a practical approach of business working carefully, respecting people, increasing awareness, and the moral, most importantly, what I felt was the moral and ethical underpinning, which needs to be, as an academician, I feel needs to be inculcated and put into the students. So I really believe that it has created a huge amount of impact among the students and the participants, and they from today's session. Thank you so very much for valuable time to spare with this huge audience to make an impact, to make a change in their lives. Thank you so much, sir. Now, I will hand over the session to Mr. Rohit Ramamurthy to introduce our panelists for the day. Over to Rohit.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Once again, a hearty welcome to all our participants out here. It's been very overwhelming for us ever since morning. We nearly have a house full, and sincere apologies from the bottom of our heart to all the participants who could not really join in time. I hope that you did manage to get in, and also a very warm welcome to all our viewers on Facebook. So before we get started with our first panel discussion for the day, a quick guidelines. We will first have our panelists speak a few words and give their opening remarks before we can take forward with the questions which are posed for the panelists individually. I begin the session by introducing our first panelist for the day. Professor Krishna Kumar Balaraman. Dr. Balaraman is a faculty in the strategic and public policy area at Apologies for that technical glitch. I beg your pardon. Dr. Balaraman is a faculty in the strategy and public policy area at the School of Management and Entrepreneurship at IIT Jodhpur, affiliated to IIT J Center of Technology, Foresight and Policy. And he's associated with IIT Jodhpur School of Artificial Intelligence and Data Science. He has more than 2 decades of international leadership experience in developing products and solutions in leading-edge technologies, and continues to advise startups on business models and strategies. Dr. Balaraman is an alumnus of IIT Madras, IIM Bangalore, and NLSIU Bangalore, and University of Madras. He has chosen an academic and research role in the past decade. Professor Balaraman has research, teaching, and consultancy interests in areas of strategic management, strategic foresight, behavioral strategy, entrepreneurship, corporate governance, strategic decision-making, strategic alliances, and international business. It is an absolute privilege to have you with us today, Dr. Balaraman. Thank you so much for your kind acceptance. Your wealth of experience and knowledge in multiple domains will certainly add a lot of value to our discussion today. Moving further to our second panelist of the day, Mr. Vinay Rotti happens to be the Senior Vice President, Corporate and Development and Strategic Finance at Bounce Share. Mr. Vinay is a qualified chartered accountant and a commerce graduate. He has been associated with Bounce since the initial days and has held various roles in the last 5 years at Bounce, including finance, policy, and international relations. Currently, Mr. Vinay is the Senior Vice President, Corporate Development and Strategic Finance. Prior to Bounce, Mr. Vinay has over 15 years of experience across organizations such as Deloitte, PwC, Healthium, and has also served across various functions in the financial advisory services, corporate finance, and investment banking. During his tenure, he has successfully handled mergers, takeovers, and joint ventures. He's also had the opportunity to raise funds, be a part of valuations, and has been closely related with advisory matters across the globe. It is such a joy and pleasure to have you amongst us, sir. Thank you so much for your kind acceptance, and once again, a very warm welcome to you. I now request Professor Bai to introduce the other two panelists.
Thank you so much, Rohit sir. Our next panelist for the session is Mr. Niranjan Khatri, the founder of iSambhav, is the ex-general manager environment initiatives of ITC Hotels and has pioneered the concept of eco-design in ITC Bay Island, Port Blair, way back in the 1990s, when it was a very novel concept. Since then, he has been associated with countless environmental and sustainability initiatives with hotels in India. Mr. Khatri headed CII Renewable Energy Cell from 1996 to 1997. Mr. Khatri is on the board of National Trust, Ministry of Social Justice, Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs, Ministry of Corporate Affairs, Dr. Reddy's Foundation. He has developed the Eco Rating for Schools for the Delhi government, distributed to over 1,200 schools, which has been translated into Marathi and further distributed to 6,000 schools in Maharashtra. He has trained more than 2,600 teachers in 1,200 schools, including 6 rural schools, in understanding the nuances of ecological design. The program was also conducted for the hearing, speech impaired in Koppal village and for visually impaired in Enable India in Bangalore for 90 people, which was the first of its kind. He has trained more than 2,000 employees of Indian Railways on sustainable development and has been the ex-chairperson FHRAI Environment, Western Region and CII National Water Committee. Mr. Khatri has made a humble beginning to fortify the nutritional needs of rural India through Bank of Nutrition in Koppal, which has spread to 35 villages in the states of Karnataka and Tamil Nadu presently. Started the concept of sending good compost for farmers around Bangalore in March 2017. Conducted sensitization program on eco-design for hoteliers in Gurgaon, Mumbai, Hyderabad, Chennai, Madurai, Goa, and Jaipur. Mr. Khatri has developed LabPad with a supplier for children who do not have tables to write on and has distributed the same to 35 schools in Bangalore, Mysore, Dehradun, Chennai, Pune, Ranchi, Koppal, and Raichur. Mr. Khatri has been adorned with numerous awards and accolades like Helen Keller Award in 2006 and 2011, Green Hotelier Award 2010, and Parivartan Sustainability Leadership Award 2012, IGBC Fellow Award 2016, to name a few. It is an absolute honor and privilege, sir, to welcome you as our esteemed panelists. Thank you for your consideration and time. Our next and the last panelist for the session is Ms. K.S. Lata Kumari, who is an IAS presently working as the Secretary of Real Estate Regulatory Authority of India. She holds a master's degree in microbiology and has worked as a CSIR Senior Research Fellow at Central Food Technological Research Institute, Mysuru. After joining the administrative services, Ms. Lata Kumari has served the state in different capacities and significant position. She has been the Land Acquisition Officer at Rene Bannoor, Assistant Commissioner Sedap Subdivision Kalburgi, Additional Deputy Commissioner Kalburgi, Additional Deputy Commissioner Bidar, General Manager JESCOM Kalburgi, Deputy Secretary to Government of Karnataka, Medical Education Department, Director, Revenue Special Cell, Creation of Revenue Villages 2016-2017, Additional Regional Commissioner Bangalore Division, Secretary Election Commission, CEO Officer, Zilla Panchayat Kolar District, Secretary RERA, to name a few. It is an absolute privilege and honor, ma'am, to have you all today with us. My heartfelt gratitude to all the panelists for accepting our invitation in spite of your busy schedule. I hand over the talk now to Mr. Rohit Ramamurthy to proceed the panel discussion. Thank you, Rohit.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Once again, a very warm welcome to all our panelists. And from the bottom of my heart, apologize for the slight delay that we just ran into. Okay. So we shall now get started. Sustainability is becoming more important for all companies across all industries. Simply put, sustainability is a business approach to creating long-term value by taking into consideration how a given organization operates in the ecological and social and economic environment. There is a growing emphasis globally on the need to build back better and ensure resilient and green recovery post-COVID-19. We can't afford to slip back to business as usual, and we all need to learn from our past mistakes. It's time to think business, not usual, but unusual. All kinds of businesses have already had to shift, scale, and adapt their products to work in new ways, and the technology sector by far has had a larger responsibility to support. Never have things like data availability and ability for teams to collaborate on a problem in real time been more important. On top of this, there is a real need for more sustainable work practices and a rare opportunity to implement them as businesses rebuild in a post-COVID world. Consumers today are more aware and are constantly looking at high-performing products, the right price, and a purpose that they can relate and connect with. However, it is a kind of a regret that we are not yet seeing the scale and speed that we need. Still too much by the business leaders to fully embrace the change to this new type of business model. This is time like no other in history when business needs to show courage to strategies that create long-term value for their company and for the societies that they serve. This is the time to create a brighter future for all, and let's explore more through this wonderful panel that we have before us today. So starting our discussion, I'd request Professor Balaraman to give his opening statements on the theme of business sustainability and innovation.
Thank you, Professor Rohit. Good morning to all the conference delegates and my greetings to my co-panelists, Mr. Vinay Roti, Mr. Khatri, and Ms. Lata Kumari. It's a pleasure to share my thoughts with you. To begin, I would say that what kind of times do we live in, right? I think this conference is posited at a time when perhaps it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it is the age of foolishness. It is the epoch of belief, it is the epoch of incredulity. It is a season of light, it is a season of darkness, it is a spring of hope, it is a winter of despair. And these words were spoken not by me, almost 160 years ago by Charles Dickens in The Tale of Two Cities. And 2020 seems to have split our lives into two tales, so to speak. It was best of times, it was the worst of times. But yet we have to sustain. And this year, the past year has shown us how humanity is able to survive, not just survive, sustain and prosper. Sustainability is a very interesting word. It could mean different things to different people. It could mean physical sustainability, environmentally friendly, a going concern, economic growth, or more in general meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs, as Tresna said. In 1987, when the Brundtland Commission report came out, on the World Environment Commission report came out, the conception of sustainable development brought together equity between generations and equity within generations. And to quote them, even the narrow notion of physical sustainability implies a concern for social equity between generations, a concern that must logically be extended to equity within each generation. From a business sense, I'd like to highlight what are the aspects that are necessary to consider if one is to talk about sustainability. One talks about firm level sustainable advantage along with nationwide sustainable advantage. And as the Vice Chancellor also highlighted the Tata Steel case, both social and environmental inclusivity is an important part of business sustainability. And what makes sustainability a very important point in this age of possibilities and challenges, sustainability, both in the social and the business sense, starts to have a new resonance. About a year, almost exactly a year ago, right? I think it was January 27th that India officially announced its first case of COVID, and then everything changed. A lot of assumptions made by many businesses the previous year was starting to fall apart. Assumptions of a stable business, social environment have all fallen apart, right? Sustainability, as we had come to believe, based on continuity of things, needed to be revisited. We have hit a reset button. The best part about all this is it gave us time to stop and take stock of how we lead our lives and how we go about doing our business. Our assumptions of how we conduct our business and social affairs need to be constantly revisited, questioned, and updated. That is one of the main pillars of having a sustainable social and business operation. What about the next one? What the next pillar of sustainability I would like to talk about is constant learning, both the individual level and at the organization level. March had written his famous seminal paper called Organizational Learning, about the need for exploitation and exploration. And exploitation is not in a bad sense. Exploiting is we strive to benefit from our opportunities. When we create our resources, when we create our competencies, it is important for one to constantly explore new avenues to acquire future talent, capabilities, and be prepared to let go of the old for the new. Being from the city of Bangalore, the Silicon City, one should go back to some of the business examples like Intel, which gave up its DRAM memory chips and concentrated fully on their processor chips. And Texas Instruments, which again, Bangalore, one of the first multinationals to set up operations in Bangalore in 1984. It gave up its digital components and concentrated completely on analog components as late as 2012. And rest is history, it's one of the most profitable companies. Sustainability also includes sometimes letting off go the old and adopting the new. And third pillar of sustainability, I would like to say, is an important aspect is the ability to visualize alternate futures, to see through the apparent confusion, to spot developments before they become trends, to see patterns before they fully emerge, and to grasp the relevant features of social, business, technological currents that are likely to shape the directions of future events. The ability to visualize and create alternative futures is the need of the hour. And this is not as simple as it seems. There's so many factors, right? Political, environmental, social, technological, ethical, as Mr. Chandrasekhar previously pointed out. Many factors are there. And one needs the ability to detect weak signals, have periphery vision, come out of the blind spot. And what is a blind spot? Right? People who drive cars know that when you change lanes, there are areas on the sides of the car you cannot see in a rear view mirror or the side mirrors, and you actually have to look over your shoulder to see whether everything is fine, nothing crazy is going on to the side before you can change lanes. The blind spot. So many of the businesses during this COVID regions got blind spotted, right? And when all this information comes in, one has to interpret, synthesize, derive insights, and act on possible paths. And all this entails strategic foresight. And that is a skill which needs to be developed constantly. And that's the third pillar of sustainability as I see. Another thing is a focus. There's always this question about service economy and the product economy and the product-based services, or a combination thereof. At the very high customer touch factor, the experiential element has been challenged the past year in various sectors, be it the hotel sector, the education sector, everywhere, right? In the long term, sustainability, is it possible to have only the product component, or is it a combination of both current operations and building up capabilities for the future, which will make it easy for you to shift your current mode of operations? There are examples galore from the business industry, right from Netflix, which started distributing DVD. And when it started seeing that its competition came from Walmart, so when the DVD prices came down, they shifted to delivering their content on internet. But they were ready on internet for the past 6 years doing various other things. With the readiness matters. Even the delivery services we see in India right now, right? Many of the restaurants are closing down, but food delivery business seems to be arguably thriving. Grocery delivery services. A big supermarket chain was sold off a couple of months back due to raising costs and debts, but yet grocery delivery services are surviving. The focus on future and related innovations is a must for adapting the circumstances. And above all, I'd like to point out before I hand over to the other panelists, that individuals matter, and organizations and societies, and we as a person, we need to realize that individuals matter, especially in the micro foundational viewpoint, because individuals bring different kinds of thought processes, talents, characteristics, and in the multi-level organization or in multi-level structure of the society, individuals are the emergent cause of capabilities, and together they can do things which are much bigger than an individual. And sustainability can be a very important aspect in the thought process. So listening to people, citizens, like Mr. Chandrasekhar again said, it's not the road or the tree, it's the road and the tree. It's not the product or the service, it's product and the service. And how we are going to merge these is going to set the way for the future of sustainability. With that, I'll stop my current opening thoughts, and I will hand over to Rohit and other panelists.
Thank you so much, sir. That is absolutely insightful, Dr. Balaraman. Thank you so much for your opening remarks. Coming to Ms. Lata Kumari, ma'am, what do you have to say? What does sustainability mean according to you? What would be your opening remarks, ma'am? I think she's facing some sporadic network. Coming to our next panelist, Mr. Niranjan Khatri, it's an absolute privilege to welcome you, sir. What would be your opening remarks when we talk about sustainability? Sir, I guess you're muted. You'll just have to unmute yourself. Sorry about that.
Yes. Am I audible?
Yes, please.
A short answer of sustainability from an individual perspective is that how do we tighten our demand for resources, etc., and adopt resource modesty as a daily attribute in life? Because as the first speaker rightly pointed out, that we are not looking at intergenerational responsibility, and it's not on our radar screen. And unless we mend our ways and improve resource efficiency and have empathetic service design to ensure that through our use of resources, somebody in rural India or some other part of the country is not denied his or her rightful share.
Thank you so much for that, sir. Ms. Lata Kumari, ma'am, if you can like to
Actually, good morning to you all, and I'm very happy to join you all and to see all elite panelists over here. Sorry, I'm just moving because of time paucity. Just I'm moving ahead with my regular work. But it's first of all, I would like to thank the Giant team for organizing such a thought-provoking virtual session on this subject. And since I'm a bureaucrat and you people are all talking in a broader sense, very academically with a very high ideas and very big thoughts, but let me focus myself onto the some specific field which relate to the ground reality. And for cutting to me, to sustainability, as we all know, literary meaning, we can say that the sustainability in terms of, the three pillars with the socio-economic and also the other one. So for me, sustainability is that it is actually a fight, a struggle between a value versus a greed, a need versus a greed, and there is an as we all heard the previous speakers, Honorable Guru Murthy and also Honorable MP Chandrasekhar. So it was a very thought-provoking. Um, uh, um, and for me, since I'm working in a real estate sector, so I will limit myself to the this sector. And as a bureaucrat, I restrict myself and I present my views on this sector only. Thank you.
All right, ma'am. Thank you so much. We have a few questions lined up for you, which we will be shooting at you in a while from now. Coming to our final panelist, Mr. Vinay Roti. So, what are your opening remarks after hearing out to all other panelists? What do you have to talk about sustainability?
Hi, good morning, everybody. Firstly, thank you for having me here. And there's a very, I'm extremely happy to be here because I started my CA journey by being a CA Foundation student at the Jain University. So it's really, I'm very, very happy to be here. Just talking about sustainability, I think I'll keep it very short and simple in two ways. One is as an individual and one as a business unit. So sustainability is not about being afraid of a resource deprived future or accepting to limitations as an answer, right? So we have to be, it's more about focusing on or appreciating what we have and make wiser consumer choices, finding innovative solutions that the current global the globally all of us are facing as challenges. So that's more from an individual perspective. It's completely up to us to choose and make or live a better way, and not by compromising the way we are living. And more from a business perspective, sustainability is about being responsible and mindful of the ecosystem that we operate in. So it has to ensure a harmonious and a healthy equilibrium between the environment and all its stakeholders or the inhabitants of the society we live in, because it's not just about making profits or gaining more consumers and stuff like that, but it's also in terms of how you achieve doing these two things. So I'll just keep it very short, and hopefully over the course of it we'll have more topics to discuss on.
Sure. So panelists, I'd like to ask a question over here that a lot of in the past, when you talk about business sustainability before COVID, before the pandemic, people would merely refer to sustainability as a part of their basic CSR activity. Do you think about it now? Do you think that there is a high momentum? The entire space of sustainability is catching up on. Can you relate this with any personal experiences from the industry that you belong to?
Your voice broke. Can you repeat your comments again, please?
Yeah, sure, sir. So when we talk about sustainability, sustainability would be referred to as just a basic CSR activity until the COVID-19 times. And now a lot of businesses, I would say a lot of business houses, a lot of verticals in today's time are looking at complete ways to sustain themselves. So what do you think about this? Do you think this is going to catch more momentum in times to come? Or where do you see sustainability as we move forward? Can you quote the same with some examples of the industry that you represent?
May I respond to that?
Yes, please, sir. Go ahead.
Okay. I think let me give you first of all a big namaskar, sat sri akal, adab to all of you. And let me just share with you my own experience 32 years back when I was in a very harsh location. I was running a small 45-room hotel. And I did not know the spelling of environment. And I got two requests from the local administration, the late Admiral Govil, Commander-in-Chief of the Navy, and Mr. Sinha, Conservator of Forest. They called me and told me very politely, Niranjan, please do something about your tourists. They are spoiling the islands. They are littering the islands. They are breaking the corals. Please do something about it. When you are 34-year-old, you're naive, and I was very naive. And without thinking, I said, yes, sir, 3 bags full. I'll do something about it. And like I mentioned, I didn't know the spelling of environment those days. But having promised something to these two gentlemen, it led me to interacting with my own heads of department to find out if they had any solutions. And I got a blank from them. And then my journey started by putting a small sticker on the packed lunch box, which was being littered. And on that, we put a message, please do not litter the island, please bring it back to the hotel for disposal. And lo and behold, 50% of our tourists brought it back, but 50% didn't bring it back. But I was not happy with 50% compliance. So we shifted from cardboard packed lunch box to steel tiffin box, because we realized that the one-time use cardboard box was leading to deforestation, and we were in the midst of a beautiful forest. And when we did some life cycle analysis of this shift from cardboard packed lunch box to steel tiffin box, we found that we are saving 6 rupees per box every day. And the cost of steel tiffin box was 20 rupees. So we got our ROI in 3.5 visits. And ROI is not what you ladies and gentlemen are thinking. ROI is return on imagination. And we didn't know that we got into Swachh Bharat Abhiyan without these jargons which are there. And I must also admit that our industry is very resource intensive. And that led to looking at all the use of paper across the hotel, and we eliminated nearly 50% of unnecessary use of papers. I'll give you another simple example. Our chefs used to wear paper caps every day, and at the end of the day, it used to get smeared with sweat and whatever else, and they used to throw it. We said, no, this is not a good practice. Again, linking up to the forest, and we shifted them to a cloth cap. So a more durable decision. And similarly, we were not aware of the Montreal Protocol of 1988. And we used to use this room freshener, and it had a fine print on that this creates ozone holes. So when we saw that, we said, oh, stop using this. And what was the solution? We told housekeeping department to open the windows and let the breeze come in and knock off the bad odor from the room. And if the smell still lingers on, light agarbatti. The story is very long, but the point that I'm trying to make is that we went through every process of every department, and we did not know about Six Sigma those days or eco-design those days, but we became mindful of the fact that we were in a very sensitive zone, and it made a lot of business sense. On a turnover of 50 lakh, we saved 10%. And that model got scaled up in ITC hotels, and we shared it with many stakeholders. I had the opportunity of writing a case study for ILO, and ILO shared that case study with hoteliers across the world. And then when the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal came in 2015, I did a comparison with the 17 indicators of the UN SDG, and we found that we had conformed to all the 17 indicators without knowing the language of environment. The story is much longer, but I'll share this as we go along. Thank you.
That was absolutely insightful and a very nice anecdote for all of us to learn from. Coming to Mr. Vinay, so we have been seeing that a lot of bounce bikes are resorted to a lot of damage by people. So now, if I were to ask you, okay, how are you? What are the ways that you are dealing in order to sustain yourself as a business? Because I'm sure that these damages accrue a lot of costs on the company as a whole.
True, yeah, I think we're fortunate that we launched in a city like Bangalore, where overall, if you compare to some of the global, in terms of the statistics, we're probably in a better off society. But having said that, yes, our bikes do sustain some damages. I think there are two parts to it. One is we're moving away from, like I told in the initial period itself, like we have one choice to make as a player, either as a business or as a consumer. So that's one which is completely in our hand. And then there is another aspect, which is the ecosystem or the environment that we operate in. So even in this particular problem that we're facing, we had two things. One is what we could do to cut it down, and what are the other things that which was beyond our control. So the first aspect of it, in terms of what we could do, was we started heavily innovating on bringing in solutions within the bike to sustain these kind of bad behaviors. So what we've done is, over the course of last 15 odd months, we've actually designed and developed a completely fleet-friendly vehicle that's in terms of patented, and is going to be launching in the city of Bangalore very soon. We actually already launched it in some of the parts of the country, and it's undergoing a very, very rigorous testing. So these bikes are going to be largely damage proof, so to say, in terms of vandalism proof. They're not going to be too many plastic parts jetting out. And more importantly, it's a very sustainable way, right? Because it's completely EV run, indigenously developed in India, most parts of it at least. So that's one bit of it, what we did. The second part of it was shaping the behavior of the consumers itself who were using it. So we did a lot of, in terms of awareness creation, to tell them why this is not supposed to be done the way it is. Because see, at the end of the day, it's not about the bike being someone else's. It's basically the bike that you shared, which belongs to everybody else. And it's not just, it's not a public property that you can damage and things like that. So we did a lot of community building in terms of to educate people as to why, what are the benefits of shared mobility. For instance, one shared mobility vehicle like a Bounce is effectively taking away 8 to 10 unique bikes off the road. So whether it's in a fuel or an electric vehicle, when vehicles are being shared by multiple people, you're actually decongesting the road, whereby now, reducing the pressure to have larger roads, cutting down more trees, and also the kind of carbon emission that goes. It's not just about the tailpipe emission that happens when a vehicle is being run, right? It's also about the emission that goes in at the stage of manufacturing a vehicle itself. So effectively, if you have lesser number of vehicles, you've already done yourself, great service. Now to do it on an electric vehicle, it becomes that much more beneficial. What we started then doing was, in addition to creating this awareness for people to use these vehicles more responsibly, we also started banning some of the bad elements who were doing probably repeat offense, etc. So, I mean, just to give a statistics, though it's not completely linked to this topic, we've banned over the course of last 1.5 years more than 18,000 licenses, where these people are now no longer able to use our services. We've also shared these records with some of our in terms of fellow participants in this ecosystem, where we've requested them to, deny any of these license holders service even on their platform.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Vinay. Coming to Dr. Balaraman. Dr. Balaraman, I'd like to hear from you from the education point of view. What do you think, the entire education system right now is going through? Last 1 year, a lot of students, right from school children to college going students, all of them are at home. Classroom is now shifted right before you virtually. What are the other ways that, we can witness in terms of going forward? Do you think that education will see, the entire education system will see furthermore transformation to what we are witnessing right now?
Okay, one thing is, to start with, the education sector has been an early adopter of technology. If you see, right, for the past 10 years, I mean, most of the colleges across the world, universities across the world have been online, right? I mean, right from email, very simple things like ERP to email to conducting classes. And of course, the ecosystem like IIT in India has already been running NPTEL, which is reaching out to students, reaching out the content to students, and that platform is already available for a long time. It's been there for the past 6-7 years. And the education sector, we have seen multiple players, like I can say Khan Academy, of different models of both the socially conscious model and as well as the valuation seeking model, if you will. Like you have Khan Academy, you have Coursera, and all of them have sustained. And there is a lesson to which we need to also understand is sustenance is also a business model articulation of how you want to do business. What is the value you are creating and what value you are able to appropriate from that? And the value here is to various stakeholders. And who are the stakeholders? It's just not the customers. In fact, just like I go back to Tata Steel example, I think the local community is a customer. I mean, it's a stakeholder, right? So if I take education sector from the, and going back to my previous pitch on organizational learning of exploitation, exploration, the system was already in place that you're using your current resources to do what you have to do, bring in students to the campus, deliver, on all that kind of thing. But then it happened one night kind of thing, right? March 15th, students go home, everybody go home, we're putting a lock. And did it stop there? I think that, no, it didn't stop there. It just take maybe a couple of weeks for people to just go home, recoup, and the lesson started once again. And in fact, I had, I onboarded 2 separate batches in 2 separate universities because I was in my transition myself into a new batch. And we have done that for complete batches in IIT Jodhpur for BTechs. It's close to almost like 1,000 students onboarding. So the lesson we learned from that is while the system, the things could change, we cannot really predict, right? But when an organization is ready with respect to what could be the change of tack they need to adopt for the future, their businesses become sustainable. So from education sector, of course, we are innovating constantly. I think we have tried multiple digital platforms across various universities. Each of them have their preferred method of working. We have LMS systems, which were internationally available, but many Indian universities have started adopting many of the LMS systems for delivery to students, video services. At the same time, we found that a lot of students could not be reached out, right? Because there is a connectivity issue, and many of them just put this, it's almost like a flipped class, right? And instead of inviting the students to your sanitized environment, so to speak, suddenly we are going into a completely diverse environment. The students are inviting us into their homes. And many of the students, if you see, that's where the empathy part comes from the education sector. As educators, I think I felt lost. A huge lesson in empathy, for example, is when you see the students' conditions, many of them, the way they live, then you realize this country has a long way to go as well. So education has a very strong role to play. So the students have invited us into their homes. Their families have invited us into the homes. It's no more the students listening to me. It's literally the families listening to me. And anybody who has child attending school from their home, how much ever rooms you have, you realize after some time that it's you are not teaching one of them. In fact, whole family is actually judging you out there, right? How good is the school? How good is the education and all that kind of thing. So I think that a lot of empathy has come into the system. The students also have realized that they can move on. And one of the innovations which IIT Jodhpur, at least maybe a few others are doing it, but what we're trying, we have brought in a lot of students to the campus. Not really. Less than 25% on a need basis. For example, people who need to use labs, PhD students, we are engineering institute as well. And some of the students who are in campus and some of their classmates who are not on campus, we are running a hybrid mode. So we are running classrooms where students on campus are coming into the classrooms and students who are online are attending it through our, we have a good system of cameras and stuff like that, WebEx and all that. So we are going into a hybrid mode of classes and students are really loving it. So optimizing their experience. So going ahead, I think, of course, education as a sector will survive. I mean, there's no doubt about that. The question of how the survival of individual players will depend upon how well they deliver value to their customers, which in this case are the students. And I think that's where the sustainability of education institutions will matter to how effectively they're able to deliver in this current environment of online, offline, hybrid mode. And we are getting a new competition. No more is education localized, right? I mean, you have Coursera of the world who are coming in and saying, will you complete certification? And we are also getting into a mode of fractal learning. So I think the for sustenance education sector needs to look into getting to more fractal learning modules where students can mix and match their areas of interest. Gone are the days when I come in for a particular subject and I only continue doing the subject for the rest of the 4 years. In fact, IIT Jodhpur has a very strong interdisciplinary research program, and we have a very strong minor program. The students who come in for engineering can pick up a minor program the 3rd and 4th year. So they pass out with a major and a minor. So anybody who comes in after 2 years discovers that come in for computer science, but hey, guess what? I really like to know what management is all about. They do a course on minor in management. So I think sustainability aspect, it's also one of the technology aspect which is bringing to the education sector. The other part is how we are able to curate the courses for the needs of the future generation. It's not going to be a single monolith of information which we need to deliver. It's more and more the experience which the students need to get, the more and more how they're able to curate their interest and find that a particular institution is able to cater to their difference, their evolving interest, more to speak, rather than their fixed interest when they enter. So I think a combination of technology and behavioral shifts is going to be the future for education institutions' sustainability, so to speak.
Absolutely. I would say that is absolute food for thought, and we couldn't agree more with you, Dr. Balaraman. Thank you so much for that insightful thought. Coming to Ms. Lata Kumari, ma'am, you represent the real estate sector. Now, this particular sector has been bleeding heavily ever since the last 11-12 months. What is your view as to how are things going to revive? When will we see light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to the real estate sector?
Yeah. Actually, see, the real estate sector is just like any other sector. It has also got a very significant impact due to this COVID pandemic. So actually, there are many opinions that there is a slump in projects which are coming up, and there is no, price of the units and property is coming down. It has a huge slowdown during that period. At the same time, we have a very positive opinion, and also to share with you, in a real estate authority, we have been registering projects compared to previous year. This year also, we have not seen a slowdown in the project registration. That means in a Bangalore and in a Karnataka state real estate sector, even due to the COVID, I have not seen any slowdown in registration of the projects. One thing, and second one is the trend in a real estate sector is really has changed a lot after COVID thing. The demand for residential apartments and the nature of earlier there was a demand for a residential, and the work from due to this work from home. Hello.
Ma'am, you're audible. We are able to listen to you. Go ahead.
Hello.
Please.
Hello.
Listen to you. Go ahead.
Hello.
Audible. Go ahead, please. Can you hear us? Okay. Seems like we are losing out. Sir, with your wealth of experience with the ITC group, and you have actually left no stone. Our students, scholars, listen to you right. Some of the students have a question. When you start business, a lot of them are skeptical whether they'll be able to sustain in times to come, or whether it's the right move to actually venture out into a business. So I'd like to know from all the panelists, what kind of advice would give to the students who are willing to venture out in the space?
Your voice was breaking, but my understanding is that what kind of advice we can give to the students about blending sustainability and business. Am I right, Rohit? This is what you're asking?
Correct, sir. But also the students who are willing to get into the space of business or are willing to entrepreneurs, they are wanting to know as to what new ways of sustaining and how can they bring in innovation with the kind of businesses that they're wanting to do.
Very good question, Rohit. And therefore, I'll urge the students to look at data globally with regards to the resource decline. The first indicator is that we are on an order of by 40%. There's a Earth Overshoot Day celebrated every year. And I think last year it was celebrated on 26th or 27th of August, which means that the resources you require for 1 year, you've consumed it by 26th or 27th of August. Having said this, as per KPMG, close to about $29 trillion will be invested in waste and water alone. Now, the students must be aware of the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, and everybody must be aware that we generate 150,000 tons of waste every day, and we have innumerable landfill sites in the country which occupy 1,546 square kilometers, which will become 3,546 kilometers by 2030 with a business as usual approach. So there are lots of opportunities in waste. Actually, our colleges have to change their vocabulary and bring about architectural changes in the way they conduct classes and bring about new subjects on waste management, which is neglected. Because whenever we talk of waste, we shut our eyes, ears, and nose. But if we change the vocabulary and call waste as wealth, a whole lot of opportunities arise. And I'll again take you back to Port Blair, where I was very concerned that our spent cooking oil was going in the sea those days. So I told my chef, I don't want the gin clear water of Port Blair to be sullied by our spent cooking oil. So I said, what can you do? He came out with a very beautiful suggestion that we'll convert our spent cooking oil into soap. And we did that. Now that was a pilot on a very small scale. Then when I moved to mainland and I found similar production of spent cooking oil in Chennai, we started giving our spent cooking oil to Indian Railways. They started running small train engines with that. And today there's a law in the country from FSSAI, the Food Safety Security Authority of India, that all restaurants and large caterers have to give their spent cooking oil to authorized recyclers. And this is converted into biodiesel with which you run vehicles in Bombay and many other cities now. The point that I'm trying to make is that if you start looking at certain issues from a micro level, create a model, then you have an opportunity to scale it up. So let me give you another example of how I nearly came on verge of closing my hotel in 1990. When on 31st of March 1990, we got a notice from the government that from tomorrow you will get only 2,000 liters of water and not 10,000 liters of water for your 45-room hotels with 65 staff. So we saw stars during the daytime. So what did we do? We didn't have the luxury of Center for Science and Environment or ISC or others helping us. And we were not even aware of KPMG and others. So as a general manager of the hotel, I had to run the hotels. So I called my engineer. I said, from tomorrow, you're not going to give Vinay Roti water in the room. He said, what, sir? I said, you heard me right. Stop the supply of water to his room. And we stopped the supply. And we left a note in the room stating that, Vinay Roti, if you want water in the morning, call up housekeeping. And when he called up the housekeeping, we'll ask him, why do you want water? So he'll say for brushing his teeth, a bucket of fresh water would go to his room. If he said toilet, a bucket of seawater would go to his room. But it was very annoying running a hotel like this. So we broke our entire iron pipeline, replaced it with plastic pipeline, used seawater for flushing. We created a dual flushing system in our hotel. And then all these learnings, we did not hide it under our belt. We shared it with the policymakers out there. And we took some other harsh stuff. We told our staff, there are 365 islands in the archipelago. Have a bath anywhere in the islands, but not in the hotel. We told our cooks, you'll not wash the vessels with fresh water. The first round will be washed with seawater and the final is with fresh water for obvious reasons. Then our garden looked like a Thar desert. I was running a business. I cannot expect Roti to come to my, Vinay Roti to come to my hotel and see a hotel which doesn't have a proper garden. So I told my engineer, dig a well. He was horrified. He said, sir, we are on the coast. We'll get seawater. I said, no, we are on a hill slope. You dig a well at 6 stories and go up to 3rd stories. And we harvested 2 lakh liters of water when it started raining. And we use that water for gardening. The problem is still not solved. And then we made a drainage at the edge of the sloping roof and we harvested that water. Now, some of you might wonder, why did I have this Cape Town situation in 1990? It happened because in 1989, the Northeast monsoon failed in Port Blair. And in Port Blair, there's only one dam, there are no rivers, and there's no tanker. So you had to make yourself Atmanirbhar. So having experienced this, I started working with policymakers and told the local administration that they must make rainwater harvesting mandatory in existing homes and in new homes. The administration liked the idea, they splashed the idea in the newspaper, but when do you think it was implemented? 2007. The point that I'm trying to make is you can have the best ideas, but it takes a long time for policymakers to accept new ideas. There are many more examples, but let's give opportunity to other speakers also. Thank you.
So thank you so much, sir. That is absolutely insightful for us to hear. Coming to Mr. Vinay, what kind of advice would you like to give to the students since you've represented and worked for different verticals throughout your professional career? So what kind of an advice would you give on to the students who are wanting to venture out in the space of creating a startup of their own?
And probably for students, I think it's very inspiring to begin
I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Vinay. We are unable to hear you. You're cracking. We are unable to hear you, Mr. Vinay. We are unable to hear. I think we just lost him. So until he reconnects, Professor Krishna, what do you think can be the right sort of advice to students listening to you right now when it comes to creating their own startup in Takika?
Yeah. So one of the things about startups is that, don't look at it as a single trick pony. See, I would say, look at the whole chain of events on the various stakeholders and see how you're creating a value. Don't try to jump in what everybody else is trying to do just for this, just because it's easy to jump in. I mean, audible? Okay.
Yes, sir. You're right.
Sorry? Yeah, okay. So one of the things about
you're audible, sir. Please go ahead. We can.
Yeah, one of the things about innovation, when you're, I've just stepped back for a minute from the startup part and say about the innovation part is that the innovation is disruptive only when a person is not plugged in, right? Innovation is always a constant process, always going on, right? Internet is not a new thing. Suddenly, but when Amazon launched their services, they were new. But by the time internet became mature, Amazon was very well positioned to take advantage of it, right? So one thing about innovation which folks need to understand that it's not a sudden event which happens. It's always been a process. Internet has been, if you see, go back to the history of internet, it's been there from almost 1980. It was first started as a possible mechanism in case there was a winter war or a nuclear war kind of thing, nuclear winter, and then how do people communicate? And that's how it started as a lab project. But it took almost a decade for it to come into public, sort of in practice, at least at the corporate level. I was in Wipro office in 1992, sitting in Times of India building, and we had two 64 kbps lines coming into us, and I was on internet at the point of time. And we had video conference at the point of time, right? And the world was not even talking about it. By the time when internet came to the public, then the new services started, right? Amazon had already started in the US, but in India, in fact, the first retail chain which started in India was, I think, something called Fat Mall, if you remember. I think it's not there anymore. So also there's something called the first mover advantage, which is very largely touted, but it's not necessarily the first mover advantage. Google search is not the first search. So you should please remember that. They came back when the market was really crowded. So what you need to, I mean, of course, with Vinay here, I should not be talking about entrepreneurship. He's more of a practitioner. But I would say that 2 or 3 things which I noticed with entrepreneurs when I at least talk to them or when they talk to me or seek advice, so to speak, is that they want to hold on to their share of the pie very strongly. right? There's a very strong feeling that I hold the company. But trust me, in this interconnected world where you need multiple kinds of talents to come in, the more you share, the better you are in a position to succeed. It cannot be that 2 or 3 people hold on to an idea and say others work for me, and then when we make it big, we'll share it with you. It ain't going to work, right? Select the right kind of resources, the right kind of talents up ahead, and increase your network. Greater your network and people interested in your business, lesser you'll be failing for the simple reason that the other investors, either in terms of their money or in terms of their energy, in terms of thought, will put in their efforts to make sure that you don't fail. The chance of failing is lesser when your network is higher. So that would be one big message. If I at all want to give it to entrepreneurs, and in front of Vinay, I'm not going to say anything more because he's a practitioner and I'm still I'm academician. But this is one thing I've noticed is please share and increase the value of your pie, increase multiple kinds of talents within your team. And I think that is the mantra for sustenance from a startup to become a unicorn and then become an organization. And one more piece of thought, this is like a personal level, is please don't start an organization for valuation. Please start an organization for growing an organization. Valuation will come along the way. If you're looking at 5 years down the line to get a valuation and exit, you're not going to build a sustainable organization. So, but nothing wrong or right, but that's a thought. But from a sustainability point of view, if you want to build a sustainable organization, build the capacity and the network you require, and then valuation will come along the way sometime. These are some of my thoughts on this.
Thank you so much, Krishna. In fact, you just answered my next question to you in advance. So thank you so much for that. Yes, Mr. Niranjan, go ahead, please. Go ahead.
I'd like to take a cue from the word Mr. Krishna used, sharing. Yeah. I'll tell you again the story of Port Blair. When I was implementing various initiatives intuitively in Port Blair, I was sharing with my competitors, and my finance guy was very upset with me. He said, "Sir, why are you sharing the secrets with others?" So I told him, please let us have clarity in our mindset. What is competitive information and what is collaborative information? And I told him that if I share my average per cover or average per room rate or my revenues, hang me. But if I'm sharing information on waste management, water management, other issues, this is the area of collaboration. And we can't have islands of excellence. Unfortunately, in our country, we have islands of excellence and we don't know how to scale it up. And therefore, again, intuitively, I got into the policy domain. And I also upgraded myself from a general manager to the president of the Andaman Nicobar Tourism Guild because we had a lot of issues with the government. So we formed a small guild of 5 people. I was running a so-called 5-star hotel, and there was one boat operator, taxiwala, and 1 or 2 other half-star hotel. We collected a huge corpus of 23,000 rupees. And what did we do with that corpus? Didn't touch 1 penny from that. I had a lot of junk lying in my hotel, and we put signage in the city because tourists were being taken for a ride for short distances. We said, let's create a level playing field. Okay. Then we made a SWOT analysis of the island. The story is very long, but in the thread column, we wrote that the Great Nicobar is 90 kilometers away from Indonesia. And this is the Malacca Strait of Malacca route. And 600 ships used to crisscross those days every day. So we said, one day there's going to be an oil spill over here. So in Port Blair, we must place oil spill combat equipment. Again, the chief secretary wrote a letter to me stating very good idea, but the idea was not implemented. I left Port Blair in 92, 93, there was an oil spill at the spot that I generally identified. And the size of the spill was 20,000 tons. They flew down the equipment from Bombay, but even that could not handle it. Fortunately or unfortunately, the winds carried it away from our island, but nothing to be happy. Maybe the islands of Indonesia got spoiled. So the point that I'm trying to make is that you need to have a big kaleja, as they say, bada dil hona chahiye, right? So that you share these strategies, because it's simple. I'll give you a very simple analogy. If Baisakhi and me are on the ship and the ship springs a leak, and she and I have the core competency to repair that, and if we don't talk to each other, you know where we go. So we are on a sinking ship and we need to collaborate a lot with various other people on different subjects. That'll help us to mitigate our future problems.
Sir, I completely agree with you word by word on whatever you had to say. I think collaboration is the key, which is really going to go the long way. So coming back to Mr. Vinay, what do you have to say in you would, if at all you have to, advise the young folks taking on the entire startup space?
Yeah. So I think there's no single silver bullet kind of a thing, solution for all of it. But I think we at Bounds, at least one of the mantra that we had was, never let a crisis go waste kind of a thing. So every time we encountered a problem, we always used to see what is a solution that we can actually, create it to make it an opportunity. So I think for all of us in any business, right, we shouldn't think that innovation is limited to be, in terms of labs, right? You don't innovate only in labs. So for us, we always were trying to look out for better ways of doing the same thing or better ways of doing when I say the same thing in terms of solving for the mobility problem. So one of the things that while we were getting deeper into the space of being a mobility operator, what we saw that transportation or transport itself was one of the highest contributor to the CO2 emissions. Close to 24% of the total CO2 emissions are from transport. And out of that, if you see from 1990 to almost 2015, there was a 68% rise in the surface transport itself, that is the road transport emission itself. So we really started venturing into this whole, at least tailpipe emission free transport solution. So innovating on the electric vehicle operated model, etc., almost since 2018 end. And one of the two of the key, I would say roadblocks for anyone to EV adoption were the fact that they used to always have a limited range or a range anxiety associated with EVs, and also the over total cost of ownership of an electric vehicle itself is very, very high. So what we thought was we used to solve these two things for us to inculcate or encourage the adoption of EV. We can't just go about people to impress upon them to say that EV is the right way to go ahead. So we thought instead of solving for changing the mindset of people, let's solve the problems that are inherently making people stay away from EV. So what we did was we innovated a new in terms of a model of running the business, which is what today we are doing, which is making it a modular kind of a ecosystem, where today we don't have our bikes which have a fixed battery, which inherently come with a large time of downtime to recharge the batteries. What we did was we made these modular batteries which are swappable. So while the vehicle is running and the battery is discharging, there is another battery elsewhere which is getting charged. So whenever you're on the move, at least the range anxiety doesn't stop you from taking an EV. The second one where we broke the cost of the vehicle itself into two halves. Typically, an electric vehicle, almost 50% of the cost is because of the battery itself. So we've now moved away into making where even for a B2C, like any of you here on the panel or any of the other people who are listening to us, you can very well go and buy an electric vehicle, which is what we'll be launching soon, at 50% of the cost of typically what an electric vehicle would be, because the other 50%, which typically goes towards the cost of a battery, now becomes like a fuel, like a petrol or any of the other things, where you pay per go. So per kilometer of electric vehicle that you use, you'll end up charging. And what we've also done is we've created a big network of the Kirana stores or the mom and pop stores where these batteries are stored. So while you're on your ride, you on the app itself, you'll be able to figure out when your battery level are going down. You'll be guided to the nearest swapping station. You just need to go find out that Kirana store, and the gentleman or the lady manning the store will come out and swap the discharged battery with a fully charged battery, and you continue to go on your ride. So we thought that electric vehicle, especially on a shared platform like ours, will be the quickest way to get people into adapting towards EV. You can, the Teslas of the world, obviously we really admire it and look at it, but it will be restricted to less than 2 to 3% of the Indians to be able to afford a Tesla, or let's say even a Tata Nexon, which is an EV vehicle and things like that, right? But we want to democratize mobility where, people, anybody and everybody should be able to afford on a sustainable, solution, which just money should not be a limiting factor, and it should not be only for some of the portion of the segment, right? The impact is on every kilometer that is taken on a fuel vehicle. If it was to be replaced by an electric vehicle, then I think the contribution will be significant. As we speak today itself, I think in Bounds, we're proud to say that we've done more than 1 million kilometers that we've transported people on electric vehicles. And I think that easily translates to more than a few millions of kgs of CO2 that we've actually, greenhouse gases, etc., emission has come down. And if this can be replicated in a global scale, I think that will be a phenomenal effort, because India still, as Prime Minister Modi believes, India still runs on two-wheelers. So all the innovation that comes on four-wheelers, the best of the four-wheel cars that may come, but still, if we can create a sustainable solution on a two-wheeler based platform, I think then we are talking about creating the maximum amount of impact. So though this is linked to Bounce, all I would like to draw and adapt to any other businesses, constantly look for innovation. Look to see whatever are the problems that you encounter, see if that can be created into an opportunity and start thinking on those lines. Like Mr. Niranjan mentioned, I mean, they could have very well raised their hands to say, if this is the only amount of water that it's going to come my way, then probably I need to reduce the number of guests coming to my hotel. But that was not what they did. I think so. Every problem will give rise to another opportunity, and I think that can be the way you can sustain your business and be the game changer.
Absolutely. In fact, to be very honest with all you panelists, to be very, I'm being very honest over here. I've had my own personal learning moments after listening to each one of you out here. But due to brevity of time, we are already running a little delayed. So we just like to go ahead and take your closing comments on the entire theme that the panel discussion is being placed on. So starting with Mr. Niranjan, we'd like to take your closing comments for the day, sir.
Please focus on social issues. 70% of India resides in rural India, and you're not adding value to them. So one of the things that I started in 2016 is Bank of Nutrition, where we are growing 5 types of saplings: moringa, papaya, guava, lime, and banana. These are superfoods. So we are distributing it to people who are malnourished. And in India, 60% of people are malnourished. And they will get the benefit of the fruits from these particular trees, and they'll raise the profile of the whole family and also ensure that children with disabilities are not born. The movement has spread to about 40 villages, not good enough. I'm tying up with various NGOs across the country, and one big NGO has agreed to work with us and roll it out in 23 states, but even that is not enough. So if anybody in this group, I would like to have a chat with Vinay or Mr. Krishna or anybody else to share the details with them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Coming to Professor Krishna, your closing comments, sir.
Yeah, so it was very enlightening for me as well, Rohit. I think it was very excited to know about the stories from all the panelists. One of the things I would like to tell people about is technology is not a solution, right? I keep emphasizing that in a lot of my business model classes. It's just a hammer in some sense. But when you're trying to come out with sustainable solutions or sustainable business. In fact, one of the questions was regarding social innovation and with respect to profitability. There are many examples out there, even in India. One of my favorite is Aravind Eye Hospital, which is very socially relevant yet profitable. So profitability is not a bad thing. It is very important for organizations which do social outreach to be sustainable, and that means being financially sustainable as well. The question is how much of overheads you want to carry from that and how much you invest back in society. So there is always a balance. If you take Aravind Eye Hospital, for example, more than 70% of the patients they treat are free of charge, and they are still profitable. But the kind of innovations they have made to make that cost possible is investing in their lens, they manufacture their own lenses, how they spend the time of the surgeons, and how they're taking in the local community into the whole ecosystem of delivering the service. Right, delivering the product. If you want to call it eyesight as a product, literally they deliver the very simple goal: remove needless blindness, right? Unneeded blindness, so to speak. So my point basically is that look at there is always a possibility of sustainable, socially relevant business practices, and just like Vinay also said, it's very relevant. The society needs to move, and it can move in a very sustained manner, in an environmentally friendly manner as well. So it just lives up to your imagination and how you're able to connect all the dots in the whole ecosystem of your business model. It is just not about you and you alone. It's about everybody else in the ecosystem, and how you're able to create the value as a transactions you create thereof. Of the stage is to say, how am I going to combine all of them to create a sustainable organization? I think with that, I think entrepreneurs, and I think even existing organizations would do well to take it forward. I hope this has been it's been a very useful session for me, and I hope it's the same for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. And coming to Mr. Vinay, your concluding thoughts.
Yeah. So I think I'd like to again stick to my industry, which is mobility. It's an irony that all of us right today, when probably the air is at its cleanest best, we're all forced to wear a mask on our face and nose. Unfortunately, it's come down to that. So we shouldn't let things like the environment determine what choices we make. It shouldn't become where every city becomes like Delhi, where we need to choose between an odd even formula and things like that. So I think where I come from is with like my opening statement, I think all of us have a choice to make, whether as an individual or as a business house. So I think we need to make the right choices. We need to be extremely responsible and mindful of the ecology that we operate in. So I think as a business, for example, like Bounce, we've taken a pledge that we're not going to be adding any more fuel vehicles to our fleet. And we've already rapidly accelerated towards moving towards only EV vehicles. And the best part about it is there's more than 2 million two-wheelers that are being added every day to India. You cannot go and reverse all of it overnight. But what we've also done is we've successfully created a retrofit kit whereby all of the existing fuel vehicles can be converted to EV. So we have done a two-way approach where one, we won't add any more fuel vehicles. Two, all our existing vehicles also, we are either selling them or we're converting them to an EV. We know that it'll take us a while before we kind of, achieve the whole thing, but at least the action has commenced and we're very confident that we're going to walk down that path. So it's about making the right choices, the smart choices, and not making compromises.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all our panelists. Ms. Kumari had a work commitment, and that is how she had to leave in between. But she wishes all the participants very well. Niranjan sir, Krishna sir, and Vinay sir, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. It was an absolute delight to interact with each one of you. I really wish we had a lot of more time in hand so that we could hear the more interesting stories that you had to share. We will definitely plan out something in the future wherein you will have some more time to enlighten us with your experience in life. Yes, Mr. Niranjan, please go ahead. Please go ahead. Yes.
I have a lurking feeling that Jain College doesn't like us. That's why they have, given us only 20 minutes. It's like sucking a football through a 50 feet hose pipe.
Not at all, sir. Not at all. Schedule a long, a complete 60-minute or maybe even a 90-minute, session with the students, which will be even more interactive, wherein they can directly ask you questions. And I think we will definitely do something of that sort in times to come. So thank you for letting us know about your intent, and we'll definitely work on that, sir. Okay, thank you again. And now I request our conference convener, Dr. Umakant S., to give the word of thanks. Once again, thank you to all the panelists. It's been a pleasure and joy.
Thank you, Rohit. Rohit, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead, sir. Please go ahead, sir.
I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to our Chancellor, Dr. Chandra Roychen, our Pro-Chancellor, Dr. Sundarajan, Vice Chancellor, Dr. Raj Singh, Registrar, Dr. N.V.S. Krishnan, Director Academic Planning, Professor Sridhar Murthy, and other officials of Jain Deemed University for developing an ecosystem that has transformed the society and contributed significantly towards its betterment. I thank our esteemed director, Dr. Dinesh Nilkant, Center for Management Studies, Jain Deemed to be University, for his constant support, encouragement, and guidance. I am extremely thankful to our keynote speakers, Sri Swaminathan, Sri Rajiv Chandrasekhar, Member of Parliament, along with our panelists, Mr. Vinay, Dr. Niranjan, Dr. Krishna, and Ms. Lata Kumari for giving us insights about concepts of sustainability in current business world with innovative practices to develop at the management and social levels. At the very end, I would like to thank our sponsor, Panchami, for sponsoring the conference. Thank you once again. Over to Dr. Shiva.
Thank you, sir. Thank you once again, everyone, for joining us and giving a pleasant start to this event. I request all paper presenters to log in immediately to join their respective track. Also, do not forget to join us back at 4:30 p.m. Requesting all participants to stay tuned throughout, as it's mandatory to fill feedback form for all sessions to receive certificate. I again remind you all not to forget joining us back at 4:30 p.m. once you wind up with your paper presentation track. Hope to see you all there. Have a great time. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists, and looking forward to our future association with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
you.